Okay, so as my title indicates, I will talk about system ID in ILC and repetitive control today. As you see from yesterday, if you know something about the system, you can do a better job at controlling it. So I like to think of learning and identification as two extremes of one spectrum. If you can come up with a very powerful learning controller that takes any unknown system and learn to make it track anything from scratch, that would be great, without knowing anything about the system. So that's one extreme. Another extreme is if you do a good job in identification to know everything there is to know about the system, and then just invert it and you're also done. Okay, so both are extremes, and it's nice to study both of extremes, but I believe that the practical answer lies somewhere in between. You make use of knowledge of the system as you learn, and that helps you learn better. And as you learn, you know more of the system and so on. Okay, so that's kind of heading that I'm getting toward the end of this talk. But my talk will be primarily focused on the ID aspect of learning control. Check it down. Okay, so first thing is, where is Dartmouth? Dartmouth is one of the 8 colleges in the country known as the Ivy League, and that includes and these schools located on the northeast of the United States in a 5-state area called New England, which includes Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. So that is called, and upstate New York, maybe. Definition of New England proper doesn't include New York, but the upstate New York is very similar to the rest of New England. Now, in these 6 states are where the Ivies are, including New York now. Harvard, in Massachusetts, that's about maybe that's Boston. That's about 2 hours away from where we are. Highway, 2 hours. So another hour brings you to Prowl in Rhode Island, and then maybe half an hour or so, maybe 45 minutes brings to Yale. Another 2 hours to less than that. An hour and a half to Columbia. Where's Columbia? Here, Columbia is in Manhattan. And then in New York also has Cornell. And then going further south of New York, we have Princeton, New Jersey, and University of Pennsylvania, which sounds like a state school, but actually it's a private school. And Dartmouth is right on the border between Vermont and New Hampshire. There's a river that divides the 2 states, called the Connecticut River, and Dartmouth is right on that border between Vermont and New Hampshire. It is a very beautiful part of the country. So, let's see. Now, Dartmouth is among the IVs. Dartmouth is the smallest college. It's founded in 769. It's the 9th oldest college in the U.S. and is the last one established by, King George III. There's a second, the third, yeah. Columbia is second, right? So it's not as old as Columbia, but it's still it's the 9th oldest in the country. Its size is, it has about 4,300 undergrads and 1,200 graduate students. It's about 1,000 to 1,500 students fewer than Princeton. So Princeton is the next largest. It has Dartmouth College proper, which is liberal arts college, and which has all the graduate programs in the sciences and the arts, besides the undergraduate college. In addition, it also has the medical school. Dartmouth Medical School is the nation's 4th oldest. It's quite good medical school. It also has a School of Business. It's claimed to be the world's first graduate school of management in 1900. And Tuck School is the smallest among the top 10 business schools in the country. Very, very nice and rich and school. Dartmouth Medical is very good, very competitive. It has about 7,000 applicants for 70 slots every year. So it's small school too, but very, very good. And it also has the School of Engineering, and it's claimed to be the first professional school in the country, graduate professional school in the country. So New Hampshire. Now New Hampshire, if you go to New Hampshire, everywhere you see license plates that has the state motto, live free or die. Okay, everywhere you go, on every license plate. And New Hampshire has the first primary in the country. I think the U.S. You know that, Okay, that's presidential election campaign. So they have primary. So it's proud to be the first. It's also the first colony to declare independence from England 6 months before the Declaration of Independence. It's where the first alarm clock is invented. Right? Yeah, and it's where the first potato was grown in the U.S. Not Idaho, but New Hampshire. It also, New Hampshire is quite a prosperous state in a way. It per capita income is ranked 6th in the country, and it's a state where there's no state sales tax. So you save 6% or whatever if you go buy something there, and it has also no income tax. Oh. So no income tax, no sales tax. But very high property tax. You don't want to know. Oh yeah, right. And then if you look at the license plate, you see this symbol here, which is also this is a state emblem, and I say also live or die is here. That's the rock formation in Mount Washington, and it looked like a face of a person. You see this? See? Right, and it's called Old Man on Old Man of the Mountain, and that becomes like a symbol of New Hampshire. So you see that this old man everywhere on the state emblem, on the license plate. Okay, and Mount Washington is there's a hotel there, historic hotel, and that's where the IMF and the World Bank was. The birthplace of IMF and World Bank. That's the claim. Yeah, that's what my next slide presents. So, Old Man on the Mountain fell off the mountain just earlier this year. There are plans to put it back, but I don't know how. This is rather large structure, but there are plans to put it back. Yeah, they've been trying to save this old man for years. Because this is very, up there it's very cold, and every year snow and ice just keep attacking him, and they try to keep his face up, but too bad. On May 3rd, 2003, he's gone. We lost that symbol. So I don't know what I'm going to do about our state emblems and driver license, no, driver's plates. This is about 40 feet tall, 25 feet wide. That's about the size of the face. Yeah. Okay. So back to Dartmouth. That's our campus. What our campus looks like. No tall buildings. That's one section of the campus. The engineering school is way over here. So, and the medical school is over here. Medical school is way over there. So that's the central portion of our campus. It's very pretty campus. Classical New England style campus. And I don't have a picture of our engineering school, but it's one of the nicer engineering buildings in the country. You know, if you go around, engineering building used to be the tend to be the ugliest one. But our engineering building is quite nice, and we are having a big addition. Another $35 billion building is coming up in the next few years as an addition to our engineering school. Okay, so by the way, engineering school is not doesn't have it's called School of Engineering. It doesn't have departments, divisions. So it's like Brown and Harvard too, I guess, right? It's no departmental divisions. So we have faculty covering each area of engineering, and we all, sort of mingle together. So you can interact with other people in other fields very easily, and that's one very nice thing about Dartmouth that I find when I'm kind of excuse me. Okay, so back to my talk. Today I will talk about these 4 items here, 8 items here. The first half I will talk about a state space formulation of learning control, and that tells us what parameter we are to identify if we want to know, so that will help us design learning controllers. I will introduce a formulation which I call interaction matrix formulation, and how that formulation can be used to handle several identification problems, not just in learning control, but in a wide range of other problems as well. So this talk today will mention only about learning, how it is applied to learning and repetitive control, but it's also applicable to a wide range of other problems as well. I would mention that when we get there. Then I would talk about system ID in the repetitive control problem, and then system ID in the learning control problem. Okay. In the second half, we'll talk about how to use basis functions in system identification and how that helps. I mentioned a bit about this optimal learning control algorithm, this quadratic learning control algorithm after that. And I go back to talking about repetitive control using basis functions and end it with conclusion remarks. So my talk would switch back and forth between learning and repetitive control, so I would try to point that out as I go along so you don't get confused. Okay, so now, state space formulation of learning control. The system is in state space form, the standard state space form, ABCD. D1 is the input disturbance, and output, not input, plant disturbance, and D2 is output disturbance. Now, the system initial condition, x0, and the disturbances are assumed to be the same from try to try, okay? And we can relax these assumptions later on, but this is a classical, simplest kind of learning control problem you can have, where the initial condition and the disturbance are repeating from try to try. In this formulation, U is treated as a learning control input, and Y is the system output. And learning control could be applied to a existing closed loop system, in which case this A matrix becomes a closed loop system matrix, and it has the existing feedback controller in it. Okay, so it looks like an open loop. So because learning control is essentially open loop, but it can apply to a closed loop system. But that's and that's what we normally apply learning controller to, a robot or something, where they already built-in control, feedback control system. Okay. Okay. Now, if I take the input-output, the state space equation above, and write it in the form of the supervectors, so we have a output history from y0 to y of s minus 1. So this is a time history of your output vector. Okay, from time step 0, from the beginning to the end of the trajectory. So the trajectory has s time steps duration. U is the control from U0 to US minus 1. So that's the input time history of, okay. This matrix we call P is a lower triangular matrix. So that relates U to Y, and then this term is actually some matrix times what is it? X0, which is the effect of the initial condition. That's the initial condition response, and then that term has to do with the a disturbance contribution of the disturbance on the output vector. Okay, so the contribution of the disturbance output and state disturbance are in here. The initial condition response is here, and the control is here, and that's the output. Okay, so just to make things easy, we're going to define a notation y under bar. So whenever you see an under bar, it means we're referring to a vector that contains the entire time history, of the variable, either output or input or state or whatever. Okay, so this is output history for the entire trajectory. P is this matrix here. U is input history, and we lumped the initial condition response and the disturbance contribution into a term called D. Okay, so our model is y equals PU plus D. Okay, now to next thing is to define a backwards difference operator delta. So delta J, J denotes the repetition number or try number. So an operator delta J operates on any vector Z is give you the difference, define the difference between the value of that variable at repetition J and the value of that variable at the previous repetition. Okay, so del Z is Zj minus Zj minus 1. The difference between the variable at two successive repetitions or tries. Okay, now if we take this operator and operate on the previous equation, y equals Pu plus D, then every terms that it's repeating from try to try go away. Okay, so you got del y equals P del U. So the change in y is related to change in U by this P matrix, and in this equation, anything that is repeating goes away. Okay, so that's, and so that we will work with this formulation, then we don't have to worry about disturbance anymore. Okay, all right, now, so whether it's there or not, we don't care. As long as it's repetitive, we don't care about it anymore. whatever controller we design would compensate for that automatically. I will mention this again later. Okay, so now that's the equation that relates the change in control between two successive tries to the change in output between two successive tries. Now define a tracking error, E, to be the difference between the design output and the output at repetition J. So EJ is Y star minus Y. This is time history now. Okay. Then we can do a delta on this. So del E becomes minus del Y, because del of Y star is 0. Right? It's the same. Y star is the design trajectory, so it's a constant. Constant trajectory. So we have a relationship from input to error. Is del E is minus P del U. Okay, so that's a key equation. Okay, yes. In this derivation, P can be time varying too, in which, okay.
So you're allowed to take that difference operator to the other side?
No, yeah, P, you see, the system is, okay, P is repetition invariant, but P contains the Markov parameters which can be time varying. So if you had started, it's not, no, so, no. But not repetition. So suppose this A become A of K, right? B of K, C of K, D of K, then all that does is that you have different entries in this matrix, that's all. So these entries will be different. But the matrix itself, P, doesn't change from try to try.
But each column of the matrix is different.
It's no longer a tuplets matrix. So if the system is time varying, then these CB, 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 or D, 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 and then CB, 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 CB. So this is a tuplets matrix. Every element on the diagonals and superdiagonals are all the same. Superdiagonals are all the same. If the matrix, if the system is time varying, then these elements are no longer the same. Okay, but the matrix itself doesn't change from repetition to repetition.
Is the shift in repetition or is the repetition invariant?
But I'm not concerned with the trial to trial. So forgetting that there's any trial.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the next slide, you're saying that the output, like the shift in the output is equal to P times the shift in the input, which is the definition of the time.
The shift is a repetition shift.
The shift is shift in repetition, not shift in time.
Oh, okay.
You see?
Right.
Yeah, the shift is in repetition. In repetition, P doesn't change.
Oh, okay.
So in time, the system can be time varying, but in repetition, it doesn't change from repetition to repetition. Okay. So,
Sorry, I was thinking.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's good because that's important. So what we have done here. Let's see if I have that.
Another way, time varying systems in this context become invariant.
Yeah.
All of them is
Right.
invariant. Repetition invariant. So you design techniques for invariance in systems can apply.
Okay. So
Yeah.
assuming, yeah, right. So the one of I'm going to state a few things that you can state from this you can see from this formulation. Number one is we've turned a problem that has two dimensions, time and repetition, okay, in a problem in one dimension, repetition alone. Okay, so we get rid of one dimension by using this super vector form. So it's okay. Second, a problem that is that can be time varying in the time domain. In the repetition domain is repetition invariant. Okay, so P doesn't change with J. Okay, so the elements of P change with time, but P doesn't change with J. So we've turned a possibly time-varying system representation into a repetition invariant representation. And learning control deals with things in repetition. So if the model is invariant, we're in good shape. Okay? Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's time varying.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, time varying is that it depends on the input way. When you change your input, you move your system to another mode. Time varying. And so when you update your input,
Mm-hmm.
you move your system to become no longer very varied.
Yeah, but
Just to make,
the-
as we remember this.
It only applies when it's linearized about
Yeah.
it-
Yeah.
the trajectory of a nonlinear system linearized about the desired trajectory looks kind of repetition invariant.
Yeah, if you look at
So you have to be in the neighborhood.
yeah. So I'll show you an example of that. When you linearize a nonlinear equation about some trajectory, then the equation will appear as repetition, as time varying, and it doesn't change, doesn't depend on U. Okay. So if you think about because and then the rest is lumped in that that disturbance, and the disturbance change, right? Okay. So because the model is repetition invariant, you can use in the repetition domain, the J variable acts as a time domain. So you can use standard control theory that you have a time domain in this formulation. Okay. The third thing is you don't have to worry about anything that is repeating. Okay. So because anything that's repeating from try to try, it goes away in this description. Okay. And any controller, learning control that designed from this formulation can automatically compensate for that unknown disturbance without you needing to know it. Okay? Okay, so if I have a disturbance acting, this repeating, I don't care what it is. Okay? I don't know how it, just use this start from here to derive the controller. Whatever controller you come up with will compensate for that unknown disturbance automatically through this iteration by tries. Okay? So that's something that is very useful. Okay. Okay. Now, the other thing, a fourth point is this formulation can be thought as a state space description because del E can be just EJ minus 1. So you can think of this as a state space model because this is like the ABCD model. So the A matrix is like the matrix here. Okay. B is like P minus P, and that's like the next state. Next, J minus 1 is J, and then that's the control. So if you think of del U as U and E as a state, then you have a state space model with where the A matrix, the system matrix, is an identity matrix, and the B matrix is minus P. Okay, so any theory, modern control design techniques, you can directly apply and produce controller for del U. And that's a learning controller, because del U tells you how to update U from try to try. And that's a learning controller. Okay? So, okay, now for example, let me give an example. The simplest possible modern control is a state feedback. So the control, which is del U, is some gain times the error. Okay, think of E as a state. Okay, and you want E to go to 0. So that's a controller written in the repetition domain. And if we plug this del U into this and see how the error propagates in repetition, you have this equation. Just plug this in here and rearrange. You have EJ is some matrix I minus PL times EJ minus 1. So this matrix describes the evolution of the tracking error history from try to try. And you want E to go to 0. Okay? So this is a matrix I minus PL here, and you want E to go to 0. that means that the eigenvalues of I minus PL has to be less than 1. The magnitude of the eigenvalues of I eigenvalues of I minus PL has to be less than 1. Okay, so that tells you how the aerodynamics propagates. Yes. Okay. Okay, so now there are many choices for L. Okay, the simplest possible choice you can make is a diagonal matrix, like phi 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 on any element. Okay, if you do that, then the del U equals to E del L E here. Remember, this is del U history, so you can write out the history of U of del U, with L, which is that diagonal matrix, E the history of the error. So you look at term by term. You can. Sorry, I go back. Then you look term by term. Then all you have is this control law here. Okay. The change, the U at time plus K at repetition J is modified from its previous input at previous repetition by some gain phi, which are elements of this L times the error. Okay, so this is a classical P time, control law. Okay, and because L is diagonal and P is lower triangular, so I minus PL is also lower triangular, which means the eigenvalues of I minus PL are just the eigenvalues of the matrix on the block, the main block and diagonal, which is I minus D phi. Okay, so you can. So if I design a phi such that I minus D phi, the eigenvalues of this is less, the norm of that is less than 1, then I have in the limit as the number of iterations J goes to infinity, the error goes to 0. Okay. So, and that's the simplest possible L you can pick. Of course, you can make L to be, you have more than one set of gains. You can have, these gains don't have to be the same. You can have L that contains element on the upper triangular, contain upper triangular elements, which corresponds to so-called non-causal control laws, ILC laws. So whenever you see, if L contains upper triangular elements, then it's not non-causal. Okay, if L contains elements in the lower triangular, it's causal ILC. But in general, L can be, it doesn't have to be causal. It's a very general form, and you can fit all sorts of designs from within this structure. And that's within the structure of L alone, and L is just one choice of controlling the state space model. Okay, so immediately you can see a whole universe of control laws you can think of for learning to design learning controllers for. Okay, so and there are plenty of papers that tells you how to pick that L and so on. So so like I said here, other choices of L, including higher order ILC control laws, in those involving non-causal filtering, can be analyzed in this framework. Okay, so it's very general framework, and in this framework, the matrix that that is relevant is a P matrix. Okay, because del E, come back here, del E is P minus PLU. So the P matrix is the relevant matrix in this description, and the P matrix looks like this. Okay, so it's D, 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 okay, and CB, 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 CAB, so it's a tuplet matrix of the system macro parameters. So these elements here, D, CB, CAB, CA square B, they are called the macro parameters of the system. Okay, in the case the system is time invariant, these are the macro parameter, the element CB, CB repeating. If the system is time varying, you have different CB down here and CB up there, but the structure of the matrix remains the same. Okay, so the key word here is system macro parameters. So those are the parameters that make up P. And if you know them, you can help. You can use that information to design a learning controller. Okay, right. So for system ID, that's what we're going after, identifying P, which contains the macro parameters of the system. Okay. Now, in the previous system, I have a D term in the model, and if I take the D term, if the system has no D term, then you can then P starts out with CB instead of D. So so CB, CB, CB here, and CAB, CAB here. Instead of starting with D, you start with CB. And you can do the same thing we did before and get a learning controller for the simplest possible case you can possibly imagine to look like this. And that shifting would cause the K+1 showing up in the controller. Okay, yes?
So what's your prescription for one of these classic assumptions in ILC physics? To get to this structure and to get feasibility conditions, and then say, well, what happens to CB0?
Oh, if CB is 0, then you have to shift your P up. Okay, so CAB will go up here, and this becomes K+2.
So
Sorry?
feasibility condition doesn't
Yeah, you just move up, right? So it becomes CAB go up here, and CAB show up here. Yeah. Right. So when you make this P matrix, you want to depends on how you to think about it. You can do two ways. You can just leave the zeros here, or you can just shift up so that P starts out with a diagonal that is non-zero. Okay, and immediately you also see things that are kind of dangerous in here because those CBs tend to be quite small. Okay, and immediately you see this matrix is ill-conditioned, things like that. Right, all those things show up immediately. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, in general, as a relative to 0, you get the term.
If the derivative, yes.
And now this is
Degree 1.
you can also say Mimo systems.
Oh yeah, no problem. Because for MIMO, CB is a matrix.
Yeah, but then you require full rank.
Then you need.
There's a little bit of a problem.
Well,
You need CB to be full rank.
yeah, you need. Okay. Well, we also talk about. I'm skip here, but we can also talk about feasibility conditions. We talk about under what condition we can specify a desired trajectory and know that there exists a control that would accomplish it. And that has to do with the rank of the P matrix. And the P matrix is block, lower log triangular. So it has to do with the rank of the D's or CB, whatever is showing up on the main element. And you can.
What else do you define in terms of the first market parameter that is full rank? So,
You can think of, yes, yeah, right, yeah. Okay, so you can look at this description and talk about conditions for which you can specify something and know that they can control that will make it. Yeah.
Another way to think is you leave it in this form.
Mm-hmm.
Just let the zeros go up until the relative degree kicks in.
Yes.
Then you look at the resulting L matrix and ask what is required.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then you'll see that
You have to shift the Y up.
becomes upper triangle.
Upper triangular.
Now clearly the causality, non-causality.
Yes. Right. Yes. Yes. Right. You have a question? Okay. Yeah. Right. So it's very clear that otherwise you cannot even guarantee impose any. Otherwise you can even tell that you can even claim that the controller will result in a stable learning process. Okay. And also, by the way, I say that CB, one of the macro parameters are one in here. Now, the macro parameters are nothing but the impulse response samples. Okay, so you take a system, apply a unit pulse input to it, and the output are the macro parameters. Okay, so CB, CAB, CA square, B, CA square. It's a sequence of numbers, and they are the unit pulse response samples of a system. Okay. So CB start out small, CAB a little bit bigger typically. So the matrix is very ill-conditioned. Okay, very ill-conditioned. If CB is very small, you need to have large gain to make the system learning process stable, and you get problem with that in terms of performance. Not performance, but conversions. How it converges, not whether it converges or not. Yes.
looks like your update will no longer contain information of the error at the first sample instance.
Which
Starting from K0.
K0, yes. Yes, K0 is based on error at K plus 1.
But it still, you can prove that it converges also in the first time
No.
The
No, you can, if,
0 is an initial condition, and the control at time 0 influences the error at time 1.
1. So you can't do anything about the error at time 0. This is,
not do anything.
yeah, this is discrete system. U0 affects state at, UK affects the state at K plus 1, right?
Okay.
You see, so you have no way to control the state at times that K, because this is a discrete time system.
So in this case, let's understand the feasibility condition is converges over, let's say, all
Okay,
then relative to
right, yes.
Every time step you can control.
Yeah, every time that you can control, you can make it so. And the times that you cannot, you have no control over, then you cannot do anything. And nobody can do anything. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. All right, so, so this is summary of what I just said. The repeated disturbance are absent in this representation. Learning control laws derived from this representation compensate automatically for disturbance without having to know them, repeating disturbance without having to know them, and that's a very useful feature. Standard modern control methods can be applied to this state space representation to produce ISU laws automatically, and I show you how to use the simplest possible state feedback, control law to make ILC laws. And then the key statement here, as far as system ID is concerned, is that the Markov parameters, CB, CAB, C squared, those combinations are the relevant parameters in this representation. And they are the parameters that we want to identify. Okay? Okay, so this is a digression. This is a, we use this technique on a robot. It is a 7 degree of freedom robot, and with I think this one is with a we can use a 1 gain controller, learning controller. That's a 2 gains. Yeah, 2 gains means their L has phi and then another band gamma on the lower, lower sub diagonal. Okay, so we have 2 gains controller, and that that's the learning. That's how the learning converges as a function of repetition number. There's 7 joins here on this robot, and there are 7 plots here, 1 for each join. So we could make a robot learn like that. This is an old result, 1994, and the formulation, the delta formulation I show you was done in 1988. So it's quite many years ago. Okay, so that's what we did. Okay, now, so let's switch to, let's now think about, now that I show you the macro parameters are the relevant parameters, now we are going to talk about identifying, identification of these macro parameters. Okay, now this is a fun problem, and I show you why it's fun. Okay, think about the easiest problem you can think of. This model, starting from the state space model, ABCD. Okay, no disturbance, no noise. Okay, that's it. Okay, now imagine you have a long set of input-output data available. You go to the system and you jiggle it. You have U0, U1, U2, and so on. Jiggle it, say random input that you put in, so you know, and you record the output. Okay, a very long set. Okay, long as you want. Now the question is, how do we identify the macro parameters D, CB, CAB, so on, from this set of data? Okay, so let's suppose we identify P minus, so the P the P, let's see, 1, P minus 1, the P plus 1 macro parameters in here. Okay, and we have lots of data, as much data as you ever want. And we want to get these macro parameters from this set of data. Okay? So that's a problem. That's a problem we're trying to solve. Okay? So this is motivation. Okay? So now how do we solve this problem? It says, how can we get stuck? Okay? Suppose you just write down, okay, so I know the macro parameters relate input to output. So I'm going to write it down. So this equation is equation that relates the output at time set k to the system initial stage and all the inputs up to from U0 up to UK. So all the input from U0 up to UK affects YK. Okay, the initial condition also affects YK, and this equation is a linear equation in the macro parameters. Right? So very easy. D, CB, they appear linearly. So that's the good news. Okay, it's a linear equation. It's got to be easy, right? All right? So now, what are the problems? First of all, you don't know x0. We don't know x0. Second, the number of unknowns in this equation increases with k. You can see if this is yk, then the macro parameter required is ca power k minus 1b. Okay? So the number of unknown macro parameters increases with k in this linear equation. Okay? So that could cause some trouble, but let's look at some math. Let's look a little bit more and see, how can this be? This is so easy a problem. So let's say, okay, so let's write out, we have our input-output data, and we just write that equation for every time step, for every data that we have. So we can put the data in this matrix form. Y equals capital Y times U. So all the available output data is put in here. Okay? The macro parameters, all the unknown macro parameters are put in here, and all the U's are put in here. Okay? And notice in this equation, I ignore the initial condition. So I'm saying the previous equation has the unknown initial state in it, which I'm going to, for the time being, assume that's 0. Okay? And that's a bad assumption, because it's a very weak assumption. But let's say if that's even an assumption, what do I have? Okay? So I have this equation. So Y contains everything I know with the output. Capital Y contains the macro parameters I want to solve, and that U is a matrix containing the inputs. So it's a linear equation, so why don't we just invert it to get capital Y, right? Easy enough. But that requires us to make the assumption that the initial condition is 0, which is not a good assumption. But we can really, yes. Well, but then you get an approximate solution, right? Because you're going to say, if I wait long enough and I neglect the effect of this condition, the macro parameters will decay and I can truncate and all that. But then you are saying I have a perfect linear system, perfect data, and I don't get perfect answer? Not very good, theoretically, right? So the issue is we can't limit the number of macro parameters in Y without throwing away data. Because in this equation, you see, every time you add a new data yk, you have to introduce a new macro parameters. So the number of unknowns and number of equations don't, you have number of unknowns keep increasing as you add more equations to maintain this equation as a linear equation. Okay, so that's not very good. That's the second trouble. The third trouble is if the system has one input, then U is square and full rank. If this matrix, if U0 is not 0, then you can, then it's clear that this matrix is square and full rank for single input system. Then this inverse exists and unique. Therefore, you can solve for the inverted uniquely and solve for the macro parameters. So that's very clear. But so that's no. Now, if the system has multiple inputs, has more than one input, okay, say 2, and if we look at this equation and counting the number of equation unknowns, you find out that there are more unknowns than equations. Okay? There are more unknowns than equations, which means that you cannot solve for the Markov parameters from this set of equations. There's not enough equations. You say that doesn't make sense, right? That doesn't make sense. But mathematically, that equation, that's what that equation says. Even the set of data. Yes. No. That because no, can do because this set of equations you have more unknowns than equations, which means that the zero inverse with size could give you an answer.
L here,
not P, right?
Why you have why do you estimate up to L?
Well, because this like I said, for this equation contains the Markov parameter and they increase with k. Every time you write a new k, you have to add a new Markov parameters in it to it. Okay, its number of Markovs are not fixed. If the system is stable system, you can truncate and say after some time the Markov parameters decay to 0, therefore I can ignore the Markov parameters from that point on. Then now you have a finite set of unknowns to solve for. But if you don't make that assumption, then the number of unknowns keep increasing as you introduce more you write more equations. So they don't catch up. You don't catch up. In fact, in the case where you have multiple input, you're always behind. You don't have enough equations.
But I thought you had an infinite set of data and a finite set of Markov parameters. That's assumption of the stability.
It has to, if the system.
You still can't truncate to the infinite set of. He will truncate it after a while.
I will do something.
Before he does, the output for later data depends on more Markov parameters. You can't throw them out.
You can throw them out.
Unless you say they're negligible.
Yes, unless you say they're negligible, which means you say the system is stable, and I'm going to solve for so many Markov parameters which I consider to be non-zero. The rest I consider them to be 0, and then then you can do what you just said. Otherwise, you cannot. Yes. Yeah.
Why don't you solve for finite transcribe or like black box model? Let's say I have a state-based model, state model.
Oh, yeah, you don't want to do that because that requires you to assume how many states they all have.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you truncate anyway.
No, I'm going to do it exactly. No, answer will come. Okay, don't worry.
I don't see why you estimate the Markov parameters.
We need only p minus 1 in our learning control representation. But when you write that equation, this equation that relays the input-output data to the input to output data, the Markov parameters appear as linear coefficients, and the number, and you need, for example, to write yk, you need Markov parameters up to c power k minus 1b.
This number is bounded by a trial.
No, it's
Bounded by
it's
the data depends on number of Markov parameters equal to the number of data time steps. And even if you say you want to solve for only 3 Markov parameters, the data depends on all of them.
yes. So right, the data depends on all of them.
You can't throw them out unless you make some assumptions.
Even if you only want 3, if you run your trial for 15, you get 15. And there are 15 that affect, even if you only wanted 3, not longer, the more show up.
Right. Yeah. The equation requires you this linear equation requires you to have Markov parameters up to c a power k minus 1b if your output is yk. So even if you want only 3 Markov d, c, b, c, a, b, all you want, you still have to write this equation down for every time set k. In the case bigger than 3, you have to involve additional Markov parameters.
K has a bound size smaller than, let's say, capital M, the trial line.
No.
You are interested in the outputs over a finite trial line.
We interested in the Markov parameters from here. We're interested in this Markov from CB up to CA power S minus 1B. That's all we want. Okay, but when we use the input, we write out the input-output map. That input-output map will involve additional macro parameters beyond those we're interested. Yes.
If you're
Yes.
going to use more data than that.
If you are,
If
yeah,
you only use this much data, you haven't got enough information.
right. We don't need more, but to use that, okay, this equation relates macro parameters to data, and it's a linear equation, so we want to keep those equations. So we're going to write this equation for every data amount, every data we have. So as we write out this equation for every k, when we go k beyond s, this equation requires you to put in additional macro parameters. We have an infinite set of data. We have an infinite.
If you stop it at S, you still haven't got the first term, and then it's all the input, all the output, you've got more.
Yeah. So this,
You still haven't got
you still have enough data, because let's think about the two input case. Okay, the system has two inputs. This U matrix becomes a tall matrix, and then you count them of unknowns. You have an equation. You find out that as the system has more than one input, no matter how much data you have, okay, you are not going to catch up in terms of number of unknowns catching up with number of equations.
You lose linearly with time.
Yeah. Yes.
So if it's single output, there's no problem.
If single input number, then you can do this and invert this U to get y, but that requires you assume zero initial condition. Well, no problem. Yes, but that is yes. You can find macro parameter assuming zero initial condition, which is not a good assumption. But if you do have this condition, you can just invert this U and solve for the macro parameters uniquely. Now, if we have more than one input, this U becomes a tall matrix. You count the number of equations and unknowns. You find out there are more unknowns than equations, which means that you can solve by zero inverse by this, get a solution. But that solution is a solution that minimizes, if you do through SVD, that solution has a minimum norm, which means the macro parameters are not unique, which is completely wrong because the macro are unique. You just can't find out this equation. The macro parameter as a system responds to unit pulse, so they are what they are. And if you have more than one input and do a pseudo inverse, then you do indeed find a sequence of macro parameters, so-called solution that satisfies that equation. But that solution doesn't make any sense because that just a solution has minimum norm and satisfies the equation, but they are not the macro parameters you want because the macro parameters you want are unique, and they are unique for a given system. Okay.
Distinctly multi-input, multi-output problem.
Even if the system is single input, single output, you still have the issue about neglecting initial condition.
But you measure the initial condition.
No, you can't assume you measure that. You don't have the data. You have the system, you go in, you put in the input, you record output. That's all you have.
Yeah, but the output includes the first output, which is the initial condition. The initial.
Initial condition
Initial.
is the one step before the first
Okay, you
output.
don't have the states.
Yeah.
Output.
Yeah, the state, initial state. Okay. All right. So it doesn't make sense, right? Because but that's what the math says. That's why I said this problem is interesting. Okay. So where are the additional equations? Okay. Where are the additional equations? Well, the initial equations are the equations that relate the macro parameters. Because the macro parameters themselves are not all independent, are all related to each other. So the higher macro parameters are related to the lower macro parameters. In fact, the higher parameter is a linear combination of the lower macro parameters. Okay? So those are the additional. Yeah, that comes from the Cayley-Hartman theorem. That's let's say a matrix has a characteristic equation, and you can turn it to that equation. So the unknowns that you're solving for are not all independent. They're all related. So there's a relationship between them. These are the additional equations. Okay. The higher ones are related to the lower ones.
Yes.
But you need the order system to know that, and we say we don't assume that. Okay. Furthermore, these equations are non-linear because we don't know the macro parameters and we don't know the alphas. Right? So these initial equations are non-linear equations, and we don't want them. Well, we prefer not to have them, use them. Right? So the linear equations are non-linear. Okay? So I prefer not to use these equations to solve for the macro parameters. Okay? And then Now, all the troubles I set up here can go away, can be argued to go away if the system is stable, asymptotically stable, and we say then the system has only a finite number of non-zero microparameters, and then beyond that they can be neglected, so the number of unknowns can now be limited. Therefore, if we are writing this equation, we have a case where you have more equations and unknowns, and then you can solve for these unknowns. But that's an assumption, and that would not give you an exact answer to this noise-free linear problem, and that's not nice either. That you have to make this assumption the system is asymptotically stable, because which means you can't solve for cases when the system has no damping, because if it has no damping, the microparameters oscillate forever. Okay, which means you can't say it after some time can truncate. So yes, I can argue these problems away if the system is stable, asymptotically stable, but that's not a very good thing to make. That's not a good assumption to make.
So what you're doing is that you're identifying a finite equal to some small one.
Yes, right. And these are the problems, the classic problems associated with identifying a standard impulse response model. Okay, so now, so this is how you get into trouble. You don't have to do it this way, but if you think along this way, that's how what the troubles are, and it's nice to see those troubles. Okay, now. So this is, I'm going to introduce the so-called interaction matrix, which the formulation is, I worked out several years ago, and this is how it became, how it originated. So I'm interested in solving the system macroparameters. Okay, so the D, CB up to some time, CA, CB, and so on. Okay. So these are the macroparameters that we want to solve for. And for learning control, we need to know up to a certain number. We don't need to know all of them. But suppose that's the problem. We want to solve for all macroparameters. Okay? Although in learning control, we don't need all of them. But as a general system ID problem, you want to know all of them. Okay? And that sequence has some problems, as I described. So now, the way to get around this is find a mechanism to compress this infinite sequence into a finite sequence, which truncate identically after some number of time steps. Okay? So instead of extending forever, I going to truncate. That requires a different A and different B. Okay? Okay, and the new sequence of microparameters has the A bar, A has A bar and B has B bar. Okay? The new sequence of microparameters truncate identically. So the one beyond this is identically 0. Okay? Therefore, in this new sequence, there's only P microparameters and no more, because they truncate exactly, because the next one is 0 identically. So if I have a way to take this sequence and compress it, okay, and then the way they compress is through this mechanism here through a matrix M. So A become A bar, and A bar is A plus MC. B become B bar, and B bar becomes this matrix B plus MD minus M. Okay, and the condition is A bar power P is identically 0. Okay, which means that the macroparameter of the A bar B bar system go to 0 identically after P. Okay, so for this sequence, it's a finite sequence, it terminates exactly. So if I can find a way to compress the original sequence into a finite sequence, and then solve this finite sequence, and then I can uncompress to get back the original sequence. Okay? So that's the role of the interaction matrix in this thinking. Okay, so all right, now, the nice thing is, you can easily show that the compressed parameter sequence can be identified from input-output data through linear equations. Okay, but through linear equations, you can identify the compressed sequence. Okay, and you can do the compression without knowing M. M is a matrix that does the compression, and you can find this matrix without the compressed parameters without knowing that interaction matrix M. And then you can uncompress and get back the research sequence without knowing M also. Okay, so that's kind of cute. All right, so we can identify. All right, so now we don't need to know M for the uncompression. So we can identify this by tuning linear equations and then uncompress to get the research sequence, and you don't need to know M to do that. Okay, that don't you know M that does the compression in the first place? Because you may think, you know, if how do you go back to this equation, you can think, you know, A bar, I want A bar power P to be 0, and A bar has A plus MC. Well, I don't know I don't know C. How do I know M to make A bar power P 0? But I can impose such condition without knowing A and or C. As long as the pair EC is observable, I know that M exists, that would do that. Okay. So, and then as long as M exists, I can write the compressed sequence, and then I can undo to get the research sequence, and that undoing doesn't need to know M either. So I don't think I have the answer right here or in my papers if you're interested. Okay, so now, so we don't need to know M to do the uncompression, but M can be recovered as wherever you want to. And in the noise-free case, M is a deadbeat observer again. And if you have white noise in the system, planned process white noise, the M that you recover, if the data length that you use is sufficiently long, that M converges to the steady state Kalman filter again. Okay? So in this technique, you identify not only this ABCD, but also ABCD and this M, which is the observer gain, which converges to the optimal Kalman filter gain when the data length is sufficiently long and P to be chosen to be sufficiently large. And that's called the observer Kalman filter identification algorithm, or OKID, by these folks. It was 1992 on, and it's a that's a system ID algorithm that is used by a lot of people. So there's a toolbox for it that you can get from or buy. The toolbox that you can get is from NASA, and there's also a private company which take this and turn into a toolbox that they sell and you can buy from, and it's that's okay. Yes.
I'd just like to understand this M a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that it sort of does what the Cayley-Hamilton theory says, right? That you can only compress this sequence because you know that higher order marker parameters depend on lower order. Technically stated before.
No, it's through different mechanism. Let me show you maybe. Okay, let me show you how it's done. Okay. All right. So this is the original ABCD model. Okay. So all I did is to add and subtract this term. Add plus my minus my to this original state equation, and you can always do that, right? Add and subtract the same thing. And then replace y by cxk plus duk. So take y, plug it in here. Okay. So now you have a new equation that A becomes A bar, B becomes B bar, and U becomes V. So unfortunately, I didn't write it out here, but if you do this operation, then you can write this equation as a new state space equation with A bar in place of A, B bar in place of B, and V in place of U and Y. Okay, so just another state space equation. And then you can write out the input-output map of that new state space equation and package the data that you have, and you can package in this form where the Y bar are the system markup of the markup of the bar system. Okay, and this matrix V bar contains input and output data. This Y bar contains the output data, and then the initial state shows up there. But because this initial state is multiplied by the A bar power P, and A bar power P can be made to be 0 by requirement, by just putting down that assumption, by that condition, then you get rid of the dependence on the initial state. Okay? And why? How can we do that? Well, from linear system theory, A plus MC, this is like a pole placement problem, right? If the system is controlled, observable, then you can always find M to place the poles of the eigenvalues of A plus MC anywhere in a complex plane. If you place them at the origin, then it has a property that power raised to power n becomes 0 identically. So as long as the system is observable, that can always be done. So M always exists. Okay, so what we're interested in this process is the existence of M, not M itself. To get the system macro parameters, you don't need to know what M is. All you just need to show is M exists. Okay, and then we can do the undoing without knowing M. And then if you want to know M also, you can also do that, and that gives you the common filter result. If it's not unique, doesn't have to be unique.
No, but you choose the form. You choose the form.
Oh, in the case of a common filter, the solution is a least square solution, and that least square solution is unique, and that M will converge to a common filter again, which is unique. But in the
Stated another way, he solves for the Markov parameters of the common filter, and then knowing that, back calculates the Markov parameters of the system.
right. So don't solve for the macro parameter of the system.
You're thinking in stochastic terms, it has certain lightning properties if a normal common filter structure applies to the problem. But if you've got light additive measurements through flat noise, then long enough data set, the Markov parameters you solve for the bar system are the Markov parameters of the common filter. And you solve for that first on the light system, and you then back calculate the Markov parameters of the original system. And as you want to go on, you can identify A, B, and C size. Okay, how do you
Yeah,
CRE
right.
algorithm.
Once you know the macro parameters, you can back out A, B, C, D. Okay, so you can go from input-output data to input-output data to A, B, C, D, and common filter again, or observe again. Depends on what. Okay. Yes.
So why, I mean, this is the general linear system identification problem. So why don't you choose a parameterization that's less sensitive to noise? This is about the worst parameterization that you can choose.
In fact,
Choose a an house error model or a
in fact, the parameters, the macro parameter, the macro of the bar system, that give you a parameter which is the optimal one to use.
This is very sensitive to noise because it's like there's a finite impulse response model.
No,
so you
that
can-
goes away. That problem goes away. That problem goes away if you use the bar system. So actually the bar, if you use the bar system, the macro parameter, that model is for the presence of noise. That's the best model you can use.
In that class of
In the class of model, is the best. You can I refer to you my paper. You can show that, and that's if you use that model and use a simple least square solution, then you get a common filter, and that is the best model to use. So when you do system ID, you have to think about what class of model you want to impose, and for what you're looking for, and for this purpose, getting the model and the common filter again using parameterizing this way through the bar system is the best, because that is the macro parameters of the common filter, and the common filter has minimum residual. Okay, therefore when you use that model and minimize the residual, you get a common filter.
Yeah, but your order of your model here is P, right?
Yes, auto model is
So
P.
you may fit noise here.
In fact, as you increase P, your result become better and better, contrary to initial intuition that says when you increase your model, your equation become more and more equidistant, therefore you get more and more trouble. But the opposite is true. The opposite is when you increase P, you get better answer. And that one of the surprise that also.
But you take
Yeah.
the noise as your dynamics, right?
Yes, the noise dynamics and system dynamics together, and as you increase P, the two will separate for you.
So there's still a decision point determining how big the P should be.
Yes, it's all in the reference. Yes, we already thought through all these issues. Yes, but the noise issue will, as you increase P, noise and dynamics will separate. Okay, and therefore you get better answer. And as you try to make P small to hopefully to get more condition, problem, you get worse answers. And that's one of a surprise that we find. And you can prove that. Yeah.
But one point, I think, if you can parameterize your model with few less than p parameters, that should be much.
No, that's what
Yeah,
that's.
because
In the presence of noise, that's not correct.
yeah, well, the fact is that the result says that if you have an infinite, well, when you increase your number of data, you have fixed structure, when you have a fixed number of parameters, your estimate will be better, because that's fundamental.
That's
And what you do is that when you increase your number of data, you increase your number of parameters.
yeah.
So each individual parameter will not be less.
No.
Parameters switch because you make the get these.
P is fixed.
Yeah, I think.
P is fixed. There's some condition on P. If you there's a minimum value for the noise-free case, you can establish the minimum value for P. Okay. And when there is noise, there's an optimal P. When you then noise the data, you pick small P, get lousy result. And you increase P, you get better and better answer. Okay. At some P, you get the best answer, and that gives you the common pure again. You increase beyond that, you begin to get worse answer. But we done through the SP singular value decomposition, which can take care of all the e-conditioning due to noise. So that's not an issue, so much of an issue as you imagine.
You have some assumption on your true model.
Yeah, the assumption is you must pick a P such that P times the norm output is greater than the order of the system. Okay, that's the order. So if you have a guess on the order of system, you pick a large P so that this condition is met. This is an inequality. You don't have to set it equal to n. Okay, just like that. So you pick a large P. So as long as you have an idea of an upper bound on the system, you can pick a large P to do it. And you can watch your result as P increases, and you see where the optimal P should be. Okay, so so do not think that as you increase your model P, you get better worse answer automatically. No, that's not correct. You get better answer at some point, and then you get worse answer. Okay, okay, right, right, and that's where the P that you want to pick. Okay, and we have numerous experimental results and countless examples that how this works. So. Then we can recover the common filter and compare to the true common filter again and all that. It's all done. Okay, so the uncompression is exact. There's no nonlinear equations involved in this process. And M, the matrix M that I show you up here, belongs to the so-called class of matrices, which I call interaction matrix. And there is one M for each problem. Okay. So the problem that I just showed you is just an M that gives you the system macro parameters and give you the common observer gain, but that's only one interaction matrix. If you solve a different problem, you have a different M. If I can solve the closed loop identification problem, there's a different M. I want to solve a control problem, there's a different M. I want to solve a fault detection problem, there's a different M. Okay, so it belongs to a family of matrices. Okay, now the freedom, I talked about this already. The A bar this condition is imposed on M, and this condition has two effects. One is, like I said, it compresses the rich sequence of macro parameters into a finite set. And secondly, it eliminates the dependence on the system initial condition. Okay, that's another benefit because you look at this equation up here, you see that's the output-input equation relating to the output to input, and it has the x, which is the initial state in it, and that all multiplied by a bar to power p. And the a bar power p is made to be 0 as a condition. Therefore, you can wipe out the contribution of the initial state, unknown state in this ID. Okay, so we don't need to know the system initial state. We can still do it exactly. Okay, and answer it exactly. There's no iteration involved. It's one shot, exact equation. And we don't need to know A and C to impose this condition. That's another thing that is kind of nice. All we need to know is show that M exists, and we're through. We don't need to know A and C because that's what we're looking for in the first place. And we don't need to know M, like I said, to undo the compression, although we can recover M if we want. Okay? All right. So that's the identification. That's the introduction to the interaction matrix thinking. And that is the case when there's no disturbance. Okay, so now let's add disturbance in. Okay, so now shift here, and so I show you the state space formulation of learning control that shows that the macro parameters are the relevant parameters to identify. Then I show you how to get the macro parameters from input-output data. Okay, and then now in a simple noise-free case and no disturbance. Okay, now let's add disturbance in. Okay, so now that several kinds of disturbances. One is the disturbance that is unknown but is repeating. So every try there's a disturbance. That is unknown, but it's repeating from try to try. Okay, that's one kind of disturbance. The second kind of disturbance is non-repeating. Every try is different, the disturbance acting. Okay, but disturbance is periodic. Okay, you know it's periodic, meaning it's made up of a sum of harmonic components. Okay, but it doesn't have to repeat from try to try. So every time you start a new try, you may have the disturbance may start from a different point, different phase. There could be a phase shift from try to try. It could be an amplitude change from try to try as well. Okay, that's the second class of disturbance. The third class is non-repeating, non-periodic. This is a more general disturbance. Okay, and then there's a limit as to what you can do if you have that kind of disturbance acting from the perspective of identification. Because every time you repeat an experiment, there's some disturbance acting, and not the same. Okay, it's not periodic. It's different every time. Then of course there's a limit that you can do. But if let's see. No, I'm ahead of myself. Yeah, okay, I'm okay. Non-repeating, non-periodic disturbance. That's a more general kind which you have a hard time to handle, but I will offer some way to handle that approximately. And then random disturbances can always be there.
But you assume non-repeating, non-periodic disturbances is a narrow band noise.
Yeah, narrow. Yeah, right. And then on top of everything, you can always add random noise to your data. Okay?
Random actually is a wide band.
Random now here is wide band and this is narrow band. Yeah. Okay? So those are 4 classes of disturbances.
What is the non-repeating but periodic?
Okay. Non-repeating, non-periodic means every you can have a disturbance. Let's say it's a sum of harmonic components with the frequency change from repetition to repetition. So it's periodic. Yeah, I think it's a narrow band disturbance. I think that's just a simple way to put it. So you can that's the case when every try you have a disturbance acting. That disturbance is not the same as the previous try. That's non-repeating. And that disturbance doesn't have to be periodic disturbance. It's general disturbance. Okay. I think we can defer this to the end, and you can see what I'm talking. Okay, it's a little bit. That's the most general case. In theory, I think if it's like that, you cannot do anything about it, because every time you have a new disturbance acting and it's not repeating, you don't know what it is. Then how in the world can you identify anything, right? But if it is consistent, it is well. Okay, I'll talk about that later. Okay, and you can always have random disturbance acting in each of those cases. Now, the first case is the easiest one. If you have repeating unknown disturbance, okay, then that is an easy case, because remember the delta model. Okay, del y is p del u. So that model get rid of any disturbance which is repeating, unknown but repeating from try to try. So to identify the macro parameters, we all have to do is use del u in place of u, del y in place of y, and then we don't have to worry about initial condition. We don't have to worry about disturbance, repeating unknown disturbance anymore. So everything I said so far can be applied to this first case, repeating unknown disturbance. Just difference them out and be done with. And then use standard techniques, whatever. You can use the induction matrix or anything. You can your favorite technique to get the microparameters. Okay, so that case is easy. So by differencing out the data from 2 tries, then the disturbance can be eliminated from the equations. And then standard theory applies when treating del u as u, del y as y. Okay, so that case I'm not going to talk too much about because we already handled that case. Okay, just change del u to u, del y to y, and done. Okay. The next case is interesting. So let's talk about ID in the presence of non-repeating periodic. So discernment is periodic, but it's non-repeating. Okay, right. So and then the 2 classes of problems that we're going to deal with: control and learning control. So rapid control means operation continues from cycle to cycle without stopping. Okay, so it's like adaptive control. Okay, you just keep going. And the system is affected by this kind of disturbance, periodic disturbance. And the second class of problem has to do with ILC. Operation starts and stops from try to try. Okay, and so in the following I will show you how I can use this induction matrix or IMF to treat both classes of problem. Okay, right. So let's talk about how to use IMF in repetitive control first. Yes.
Control, that's the repeating disturbance, right? Because you say it's periodic.
It's periodic.
Repetitive control, you choose the trial magnitude to be harmonic of the
Not necessarily. Doesn't have to be. It doesn't.
That's the sort of the basis of repetitive control, right?
Yeah, you can have the period of your disturbance not coinciding with the period of your cycle.
Well, but then your repetitive control is off. You can make it robust, do tricks to make it robust, but in principle, the order of your repetitive control is equal to the period of your disturbance. So in a sense, that is repeating because you start as soon as you have the phase of the period, you have a fixed cycle that repeats every time you come back.
You can.
It's just continuous. I mean, it's different in the initial conditions rather than going resetting to an initial condition as you do in ILC. You just keep your final condition on previous trials.
Right, and every time you start a new cycle, you don't have to start off from the same place, and the disturbance doesn't have to be repeating. So the period of the disturbance can be different from the period of your cycle.
You're doing a non-standard thing.
But that's a non-standard thing, yes. But it can be the same you want. It doesn't have to be.
We'll look at a zero error and
No, well, I'll show you a way to do it. There's a way to work around. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, you can make it work, and I will show you how you can make it work. Okay. Okay.
You're not doing a standard repetitive control.
I mean, just define what you mean by cycle. You mean the cycle of the reference or the cycle of the disturbance?
Cycle the reference.
So you're saying the cycle of the reference does not have to be the same as
That's not a standard problem, but yes, but it can be if you want to. Yeah, the formulation doesn't care.
In the formulation you're going to do, it can be.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Well, no, I don't know. If the formulation I'm going to show you, the period of the cycle doesn't have to be the same as period of the disturbance, but if they are the same, it doesn't matter. Make no difference in the formulation. Same mathematics works.
So you can view the reference as disturbance. So if you, in addition, have another disturbance, like you've got 2 disturbances, but you're treating one as the primary one,
And
which is the period of your repetitive control, and then you've got another one
another is,
that doesn't coincide with that.
yeah, and you want to cancel that out, right? Okay. Okay. So, all right. Now, so now we're going to focus on this repetitive control problem, and the system is like this. Okay. So it's an ABCD system with disturbance acting, and everything is unknown in this model except u and y. Data, input output data. Okay, that's all you know. And what is dk consist of? Well, dk consists of a finite number of harmonic components with unknown frequencies, amplitudes, and phases. So what makes dk? So dk is a sum of harmonic components. Each has unknown frequencies, amplitudes, and phase. Okay. We ignore the d term in this model because the d term doesn't do much to the problem. Just make it look messy mathematically. So I can ignore it, but the problem doesn't care. You can put a d term in if you want to. We also ignore output disturbance here, but the problem can also be solved if there is. And we want to find the macro parameters. Okay. So imagine you doing a repetitive control problem. You're going from cycle to cycle. You want to do some rapid control problem, and the system is affected by this set of unknown harmonic disturbance, which consists of a number of unknown harmonic components, frequency of 5 Hz, 10 Hz, 16 Hz, whatever. You don't know what they are, and you don't know the amplitude, you don't know the phase. Okay, and you want to make it track something. Okay, or track 0, in which case it's a vibration suppression problem. And we want to know the macro parameters. That's from the ID. The two parts, the control part and the ID part. So the ID part say, I want to get the macro parameters from that data. So imagine a problem like this, a problem where you have data that has been corrupted basically by this unknown disturbance. And you want to get out the uncorrupted disturbance-free model. Okay? Okay, so how is it done? Okay, so by repeated substitution, we can write this equation, which says the state of the system at k plus p. So this p step ahead state is dependent on the state at k, depends on the inputs from k to k plus p minus 1, the previous p u, and the previous p disturbances, and each multiplied by this controllability like matrices. So this is straightforward substitution. Just say the future state depends on the current state, current and the control used, and the disturbance that will apply. Okay, so that's a p step ahead state equation. We can also write a p step ahead output equation. Let's say the output history, p step ahead output history vector, okay, is dependent on the state, dependent on the control, and dependent on the disturbance applied during that p steps. Okay, so so O is observability like matrix, and the T's are the Toeplitz matrix of the macro parameters. So that's the Toeplitz matrix contains the macro parameters relating input to output, and this T sub D, these are the set of macro parameters relating to disturbance to output. Okay, so we have a p step ahead state equation and p step ahead output equation, and we want to solve for the macro parameters CB, CB. That's what we want, and the rest we don't know. We don't know the order of the system. We don't know the disturbance. We don't know the initial condition. All we have is input-output data. Okay, so now, to do this problem by interaction matrix, we introduce a interaction matrix M by adding and subtracting the same term to the state equation. Okay, and then plug in the expression for y sub p from the previous slide in here, and do some algebraic manipulation, and we can get this equation. Okay, this equation says that the state at the future time step depends on the current state, depends on the time history of the control applied during that p time step, depends on the disturbance that applies to the system during that p time step, okay, and also depends on the output in the previous p time step. Okay, so this is just an equation that came from adding and subtracting that term to the equation. Okay. So now, in this equation, what do we know? Well, we know u sub p, because that's the data, input data we know.
we know y sub p, which contains the output data. And we don't know the coefficients, we don't know the state, we don't know the disturbance input. Okay? So everything is unknown in this equation except input and output data, u and y. That's all we know. The rest we don't know. Okay? So we want to generate data equations contain the unknowns that we're going to solve for, but unfortunately this equation contains a lot of things we don't know. So now the next step is we're going to introduce, we already introduced the M, now we're going to make use of it by using M to throw away things we don't know. Okay? So whatever we don't know, we're going to use M to throw it away. Right, so now this term contains the initial state as xk. We don't know state. All right, so let's make this term goes away. AP, a power p plus mo. Make it 0. Okay, make it 0. And then this term contains the unknown disturbance. So let's make this goes away. Well, actually, we're not going to make this go away. We make the whole thing go away. There's some thinking involved in deciding what to go away, what you can make going to go away, and we make the whole thing go away. Okay. So what we want is we find an intention, look for the existence of an M which get rid of that term and get rid of this term. So if we do that, then we have this equation. Okay, relating x to u and y. And x we still don't know, but that's easy. We just multiply by c, and then this you just multiply by c and turn x into y, and then you have an equation that contains everything that you know. And the y you know, u here you know, and the unknowns become the problem that you want to solve for. Okay, so let me go back. So if we can get rid of the terms we don't know, then we're in business. And we get that equation, and then we multiply by c, and then we turn x into y, and then we know u and y, and then we just solve for the coefficients. Okay, so now let's look at the so these are the desirable conditions. Now, first of all, I want to find M such that AP plus MO equals 0. Well, that's you look at that long enough, you say if P is sufficiently large, then M, and you can find M. M exists. Not you're looking for M, but you just want to know that M exists. So that's easy. The second thing is, how can you find M such that the second condition is held? And you want it to be held for all time, not just for one time step, but for all time, because we want to get rid of this dependence on D sub P for all time. Okay? So let's look at the second equation, which is more, there's a little while to think. So now we want to impose the second condition for all time, so we can write it down for all time. Okay, so I'm going to write down this equation condition for k equal to 1, 2, 3, up to all time. Go to away to infinity. And then I package equation into that, and I have this matrix CD plus M tau D, T tau D times is D. Okay, now if the disturbance is periodic or consists of a finite number of periodic components, then the rank of this D is bounded. So D consists of, you look at D carefully, D consists of time-shifted disturbance signal. Okay, so it's like a disturbance is a psi signal, then it's psi, and then the second row is a time, that same psi function shifted by one time step. And the third row of this D matrix is that same signal shifted by one more time step. So D consists of the time-shifted disturbance inputs. So therefore, if the disturbance consists of a finite number of disturbance frequency, then the rank of D is limited by the number of disturbance frequency. Okay? If the row rank, so that's arguing about the row rank of D. If the row rank of D is limited, then the column rank of D is limited, because row rank, column rank are the same. And then if the column rank is limited, then it means that if you satisfy this equation for sufficient number times that k, you would satisfy it for all k. Which means, yes, if the disturbance is periodic, then there exists a P that makes this equation satisfy for all time. So that's the condition we need to have to be able to satisfy this elimination. So yes.
In the worst case, you must put like all the eigenvalues of that matrix 0 or
Which matrix?
C plus M, C.
No, this is just, no, with no eigenvalues is a, no.
If you have full rank of D,
Hmm? Yeah, so has nothing to do with eigenvalues. It just means that well, it just means that the column of C plus MD is orthogonal to the rows. The rows of C plus MD are orthogonal to columns of D. That's all. Yeah, they're orthogonal. Yeah. So.
But D is full rank, so it has to be what should not be a. And all the two matrices full rank.
Well, if D, the number of rows in D is P.
Yeah.
Okay, so this matrix.
Okay, C plus M in D is also P.
The condition you need is on
The bottom.
for dimension to
Right.
be able to pull it off.
There we go. Okay, if you can pick a P is what you pick. If you pick a P such that P times the number of outputs is greater than the order of the system plus 2 times the number of disturbance frequency present in data plus 1 to account for any bias in the disturbance, as if P is chosen such that this condition is met, then M can be shown to exist. Okay, it's a long argument. Again, I just refer to you my paper. It's a long argument, okay? But basically, it says this. This is the way that you can argue. Up here is a condition, one equation that M needs to satisfy, okay? So you can count number of equation, number of unknowns in here, okay? Down here, this equation you want to satisfy for all time k, but then I argue that if determinant is periodic, then actually you don't need to satisfy for all time. You only need to satisfy for some time, and then it could be automatically satisfied for all time. Then D would be a, and then you write down all the possible number of equations you may have, all the number of unknowns you may have. You can look at this. It's a linear equation under what condition that you can guarantee that M exists.
What is Q?
Q is the number of outputs. Equations, which has many unknowns and many equations, and I count the number of equations of unknowns. If I have linear equations, I have more equations, then and this matrix is full rank. You can argue. Then M is guaranteed to exist. Okay, so the argument is in the existence of M, not necessarily finding M. Okay, as if M exists, okay, if M exists, then I can impose those conditions. Then I can just say this equation must hold, because it's going to hold for all M. I'm going to apply it to that M that exists, and then this equation must hold, which means that there is an M which takes care of your unknown initial condition and unknown disturbance. So those unknown are limited from the equations. Yes.
M has to satisfy simultaneously both.
Yes, M has to satisfy simultaneously both set of equations. It takes some more thinking, yes.
But if the second equation is defined, or going to be defined, you can prove that it exists, then such an M will also satisfy the first equation.
No, you need to find M that satisfies both set of equations. So you have to write this, because this is the first MO equals minus A. That's your first equation. And then MTD is the second equation. So I package them together. Okay, so I'm running out of time. What time is it? Take a break? Okay. 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 All right, so now, if M exists, then I can write down input-output map that relates U to Y in terms of these combinations that has M in it. Okay, and because this is a linear equation, we can identify the combination from input-output data. Okay, then output is disturbance-corrupted output data, not just the plain output. Okay, so because this is a linear equation, we can identify them from input-output data, and the M matrix explains how the coefficient of the model is corrupted by the disturbance and so on and so forth. And then if this understanding of how M corrupts the model allows you to undo the corruption and recover ABCD. So this is the next slide. We can identify the coefficient of this model, okay, from data, and then through an undoing uncompression process, similarly to what I did before, you can get back the system macro parameters. And this step is exact. There's no non-iteration involved. It's exact, okay, and algebraically very simple as well. Okay, and remember the macro parameters are what we're after, and that's and then if you want, you can from here get an ABCD model of the system if you want. But for learning control, we don't need to get ABCD. We can just work with the macro parameters. So so maybe that's where I should stop. Maybe just make a quick review of this intersection matrix. Basically, you have integral equations contains a lot of unknowns. You cannot solve for all of them because some of the terms are unknown. We have put in some freedom in that equation through this M. Use that freedom to our advantage by use that freedom to eliminate terms that we don't know. Once we show that M exists, we can eliminate those unknowns, solve for the rest. And then the nice thing is you can undo all these things to get the macro parameter back without knowing M. So putting something in, you get out, you don't need to know what it is. Okay, so that's the flavor of the whole process. Okay, so let's take a break for now. Yeah, thank you.
Let's come back in 15 minutes.
By the M matrix, okay, and so from knowing how the M matrix compressed this, and so on, you can undo that and get a disturbance-free model. That's the macro parameters, okay. And you can turn it into a input-output model like this. You can also have a model where the disturbance is explicit as an additive term in here. And you can also, where the coefficients are the coefficients of the disturbance-free model, and the disturbance is explicitly present. You can also have a model where is I call partial disturbance model, where some of the disturbance frequencies, let's say, are hidden inside the coefficients, and some are brought outside explicitly. Okay, so for example, if you have a disturbance that has 3 frequencies, and you want to cancel only 2 of the 3, then you can allow the 2 that you want to cancel showing up out here, and the one that you don't want to cancel appear implicitly in the coefficients. And for each of these problems, you can do the interaction matrix and get out these models. Okay, so disturbance rejection controllers can be designed by using any of these models. So I'm going to show you some results. We can do this identification, and we can given a set of input and disturbance corrupted output data, we can compute the through this ID technique. You can compute the contribution of the disturbance on the output. Okay, you can compute the necessary control signal to reject the disturbances. Using partial disturbance models, you can compute the contribution and the associated control action that you need to cancel each individual disturbance frequency, and so on. So you can do all these things, and this leads to what I call a clear box, which is an information-rich disturbance rejection system. Okay, so you don't just reject disturbance blindly, but you do it intelligently. Okay, so let me talk about.
Say how to fit that difference equation from all your state space.
Oh yeah, well, from the state, if you know the state space equation, then you know how the M matrix relate to the state space equation through those conditions. Then you can recall the M matrices, and then you can go back and get rid of and get the state space. So there is you can go from state space to input-output model, or you can go input-output space. That process, I think, is too involved to talk. But there are ways to get around that. Okay, to do that fairly easily. Yeah.
The number of parameters here is larger than you had, or it's greater than what you had before. You have two key parameters instead of three parameters.
Oh, remember the matrices are they are matrices. So you're going to count when you count element by element, then you get 2p. Okay, although there are only p macro parameters, but you can get 2p elements, out of those p macro parameters. Okay, so clear box. I say clear box because it's not black box. Black box is you have a disturbance and you just try to cancel it blindly. Clear box, you sort of know what's inside, and you can be clever about what to cancel and what to ignore. Because a lot of times you try to do too much, and then the actuator saturates and you get instability and all that. So with this technique, you know what you can do and what you shouldn't do, and more importantly, what you should not do, okay, to avoid cases where you may run into trouble. Okay, so what you need is a set of disturbance. All you need is a set of excitation input and disturbance corrupted data. That's all you need to have. And you also need an upper bound on the system order and the number of disturbance frequencies, an upper bound, not an exact number. So you say, okay, I think that my system has 20 disturbance in it I want to cancel, so make that my upper bound. Okay, so you need something like that. It doesn't have to be exact number, just an upper bound. Or I can say, well, my system, I can guess maybe the order should not exceed 20. So okay, make that be my upper bound. Okay, so all you need is those upper bound information. And through this system ID technique, you can extract the disturbance-free model. You can extract the overall disturbance contribution. You can compute get out also the individual disturbance frequencies. You can compute the contribution of each disturbance frequency on the system output, and you can also compute the control that is needed to reject each disturbance frequency. Okay, all of that comes from identification. And then basically it brings out all of this information that's normally hidden or left unused in a black box approach. Okay, a smart control system knows which disturbance frequency to target and which to ignore, given limited control resources. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of a truss structure in my lab, and it has that's a truss structure. It has these actuators, which these are proof mass actuators. Basically, just moving. It's a moving mass that you can control. This structure has 3 actuators. One is on this end, pretending to be disturbance. So you can input anything you like to it and say that's my disturbance source. And on the other end of the structure are 2 actuators. They are used for control. And we have a sensor. We have multiple sensors here, which are accelerometers, but the target location is there. So we want to cancel out the disturbance at that node in the presence of this disturbance, okay, by moving actuators over here. Okay, and we don't know anything about the system except a set of input-output data. Okay, so this method go in and let's see. This example shows this a case. So we have a case when we run the disturbance and the disturbance really is significant. It overwhelms the signal actually. So this is a disturbance system response due to excitation and disturbance, and this is a system response due to excitation alone. So the difference is due to the disturbance. So this is a disturbance dominant situation. Okay, so the disturbance can overwhelm the signal. Okay, so that's the relative magnitude between the 2 cases, and we can go in and identify the system dynamics. That's the system disturbance-free response. That's the microparameters plotted in CB is on plotted in time. That's the microparameters sequence. So that's which is the system unit pulse response. And on this side is the comparison between the model identified from disturbance corrupted data, okay, versus model identified from disturbance free data. So we can run the experiment again. This time, turn the disturbance off and do an ID on that, and compare that model against the model that we obtained from disturbance corrupted data. Okay, and the two match, indicating that we indeed recover the disturbance-free dynamics from disturbance corrupted data without knowing the disturbance. But we can also do more if we can also identify the disturbance. So frequencies. So for in this example, this disturbance has 10 frequencies in the disturbance. The 10 frequency here, and that these are the true frequencies we put in: 15.5, 13.5, 15.7, up to 43.7. So these are the disturbance we put in. We simulate the disturbance, so we put the disturbance frequencies in, and this is the numbers that came out from identification, from disturbance corrupted data. Okay, so you see the matching, very, very good matching between the identified disturbance frequency versus what we put in. Okay, and we don't know the disturbance frequency. That's from identification. Now we can also get out these numbers, which this says that frequency number 1, 13.5 hertz. It says that frequency contributes this much on output 1, and this much on output 2. And to cancel this disturbance frequency, you need that much energy on input 1, on control actuator 1, and that on actuator 2. Okay? So all of these come out from identification. So when we look at this table, we can know if we have limited actuator capability, what frequency we should target and what we should ignore. For example, in this case, we selected these 5 for control, and the rest we can ignore, because some of these frequencies you can see, for example, let's see, this guy, frequency number 7, it contributes very little, okay, and yet it requires a lot of energy to control, to reject. Okay, so given a budget of energy, control actuator, power budget, you wouldn't want to cancel that. So a black box system, a black box disturbance rejection algorithm will try to cancel all that and run into trouble, because you could quickly saturate actuators and the system doesn't work again anymore. But with this approach, we know what we should do and what we should avoid, given limited actuator, and which is a situation if you have a structure, large structure with many actuators and many sensors distributed, then you have the issue about can this become very, very useful to know. Yes?
How do you identify the frequencies?
Yes, because we know the disturbance-free model, we can identify the microparameters. So we know that if you know the disturbance-free model, then we know we can back out what the disturbance contribution is on your output.
You have a residual signal.
Then the residual, then we can look at the frequency content of the residual. Yeah, that's the actually you don't have to do it that way. What we do is we take the original high order state space model and put it into block diagonal form. Okay, so and then in that form, and you can see the disturbance frequency, the modes, quote unquote, modes that due to disturbance appear as modes that has low damping or no damping, in theory no damping, and uncontrollable. Okay, so disturbance will appear as modes that are no damping and uncontrollable. Okay, actually, and so that's how you can tell which block corresponds to disturbance and which block corresponds to the system dynamics, and then you can do the separation. Okay, and there's a reference in there that does the this swap to show you how to do this.
You have some sort of knowledge of what frequency range is.
No, you just no, you don't have to.
Problems with aliasing, you have
Oh, you have to pick a sampling frequency, sampling rate to avoid aliasing. Yes, yeah. Right, inherent with any digital control, any digital any sampling process. Okay, so so we know we should target those disturbance free and ignore the rest, and then a control is applied, and I skipped the control part, but this is an experiment result that the controller is turned on at that time step, and the controller is turned on, you see it cancel out 5 of the 10 frequency that you selected, and the residual contain the 5 frequencies that you chose not to cancel, because if you try to cancel those, you run out of accelerator power. Okay, and that's the control signal. It's an adaptive algorithm, and it's quite fast. Okay, now let's see. So that's okay. So now more on this formulation. So like I said, original this algorithm was developed. This interaction matrix was derived to solve this observer common filter identification given input output data, 5 ABCD and common filter gain, and that's all that, and that's how it came about originally, and that's the OKID algorithm. But then over the years, it has become a very comprehensive framework that is capable of handling a wide range of problems, and at least a few here. It can handle the closed loop state space ID problem. Okay. So you don't have open loop data, but the system has an existing feedback controller, and you want to identify the ABCD plus the existing feedback controller and observer. Okay. You can also handle the observer identification. You can do a single step observer, multi-step forward time, backward time. All these can be handled. You can do disturbance ID and rejection, some of which I just showed today, a small part of it. We can also use this formulation to do predictive control, database predictive control. Given input-output data, we can turn around and get a control again for you. Okay, skipping system identification. So, so bypassing system ID. From input-output data, get control again. We can also do fault detection and isolation using this formulation. And recently, we can also use it to do identification for the iterative learning control problem. And that's what I'm going to show next. Yes?
Correction on your first point up there.
Correction on the first?
You did it for observers before you did it for common filters. You said originally developed.
Yeah, observer first and then common filter. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it's quite general algorithm technique. All right. So now let's use this IMF in the ILC. Okay. So that's the second half of my talk. Now we focus on how to identify the macro parameters in an ILC problem. So instead of having one long set of data record, we have multiple sets now, okay? Because each try, you can have a set of input-output data from each try. So instead of having one long set, we have multiple sets to be consistent with the multiple try environment of ILC. And each try can be short. Now the multiple try environment allows us to do more with the same tool. Okay, the things that we can do with this multiple try environment. Okay, so now let's define the problem. So, it's a same system, ABCD, with the disturbance acting. And at each try, you have a disturbance which is periodic disturbance with amplitude, frequency, phase, and bias. Now, every try, you can have a different amplitude going. You can have different phase coming in and different bias, okay? And you can have different frequency coming in as well, okay? Furthermore, you don't have to have all disturbance, I already say that. And in these conditions, do not need to repeat from try to try. Okay, so imagine a situation where every try you start off with a different initial condition. Okay, and then each time you run to apply the excitation to the system, it's corrupted. The output is corrupted by disturbance, which has a different, every time it has a different amplitude, different phase, different bias. Okay, and they don't have to repeat. So they, as long as they're periodic, they're fine. They don't have to repeat from try to try. Okay, so that's the kind of data we have. And how to get ABs into the macro parameters from that data is the question. Okay, that's the objective. Find the macro parameters from this sort of data. Different initial condition is time. Different disturbance is time. Amplitude, frequency, amplitude, phase, and bias can change. Frequency can also change, but the number of them is finite. So maybe the first time you get at 1 hertz, second time you get 3 hertz disturbance coming in, but the total number is finite. Okay. So we can start out with the same kind of algebraic manipulation, write out the state, p-step ahead state, and an output equation like before, and then we introduce another interaction matrix by doing that trick. Okay, and then go through algebraic manipulation. We get that equation. Now this equation is the equation that is true for every try. So in this equation, again, we have the terms that involve the state, which we don't know. So we surely want to get rid of that. Terms involving the disturbance, but we don't know. We want to get rid of that. The rest are all no. Okay, so that's y is no, this is no, this is no, this is no. So the rest are just linear equation multiply the nodes, okay, the no quantities. So we want to get rid of the things we don't know. So we want to get rid of that. Okay, and this is repetition independent. So that's like before. Now, but the second set of equations is different because at every try we have a different disturbance acting. Okay, so we want to have this equation to hold not for all k during the duration of the data record, but also for all j, all repetition. So we want to, a matrix, an interaction matrix that is true not for all time during the duration, but also for all repetitions. The question, does a matrix like that exist? Okay, and it takes some argument, but I just want you to take my word that it does exist. After some lengthy argument, you can say yes, for data like this among all tries that I've given to you, there is more than one interaction matrix that exists that would allow you to get rid of every terms that are unknown in this set of equations. Okay, so yes, there is. So yes, there is that such a matrix does exist for all time and all try, all time and all tries that are given to you. If you give a new try, then that's a new matrix.
I think this should be an assumption. So there exists.
No, it's not assumption.
Among C.
No, it's no assumption. You can prove that if I pick this condition, if P is chosen such that this condition is met, then such a matrix is guaranteed to exist. Okay, it's an assumption because it's a fact. Okay, and it exists regardless of the disturbance amplitudes, phase, and bias, not repeating. Exists regarding of the initial condition, not repeating. Okay, and it repeat, and all disturbance frequency need not be present at every try. Okay, and all you need is to pick a P such that that condition holds.
Do you do like an interpretation of that?
Easy one?
Interpretation of that condition?
Yeah.
Like
it means you have to over-parameterize the model somehow, and if you because P allows you to over-parameterize the model, and if you over-parameterize the model sufficiently well, then sufficiently big, high, then that over-parameterized model is sufficient to cover what's in it, which includes the system and the disturbance. Okay, And this argument is a little bit tricky. That's why I just say that we can prove it exists. Yeah.
The F is the number of frequencies, and you need a second order model for each, just to make an internal model of each frequency. So that's your 2F in there, and the N is the order of the system, and
One is a bias and all that. Yeah.
one
Yeah.
is for the DC
Yeah.
and then
But this is data that is different from try to try, so you have to think a little bit more to see why it works. But that's why I leave out the argument just to say that it does exist. You take a while to see, but it does exist. So once you prove that M exists, then you can have an input-output model that where all the terms that you don't want can be thrown away. And this is a linear equation again in this combination of coefficients. That's one combination. This is another combination, and D by itself, right? So that's an input-output equation with a finite number of coefficients. You can easily identify that from input-output data. The linear equation very easy using data from multiple tries, and it's a simple linear parameter estimate problem. And you can get out these combinations, and then from this combination you can also back out the macro parameters. Yes.
The existence of this M somehow is related to, say, to observability or CC.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this C is depending on the input sequence U somehow, if I recall how you formed it in the previous.
Which matrix is it? The T? The T is just the matrix of macro parameters. Yeah, it's like the P matrix.
Okay. Well, my question finally is somewhere it proves this notion of persistence of excitation has to be.
Oh, yes, it shows up in when you're trying to solve this set of equations you use this equation to solve out the coefficients. You're gonna write y k plus p equal to unknown parameters, which is cc plus cmt. That's one, and then the other one is minus cm, and the third one is d times the data, which is u pk y pk and uk plus p. Okay, so this is equation you can write for one k. You can write this for every k, and this become a row matrix. This is the same. This become a matrix which you need to invert. So the richness has to do with the invertibility of this matrix. So the data must be rich such that you can invert this for the unknowns, and that's where the richness condition of the data comes in. Yeah. So
that is there.
no, this condition, the P condition, only tells you M exists. It doesn't tell you whether it can be identified. Okay. So if you satisfy this condition, then you know M exists. So when M exists, you have to use data to identify it, right? And the data has to be sufficiently rich. That's the next step, right? But that's once, yeah. I left it out because it's pretty standard. When you have a standard equation, then you have to look for conditions under which you can solve the parameters uniquely, and so the unique way to solve the parameters correctly, and so on and so forth. Because M is not unique, so.
So your second bullet here, you should add at the end of it.
Right. Provided data is sufficiently rich. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Provided data, input data collected from multiple tries is sufficiently rich. Yes.
Straightforward to make that matrix.
Oh yeah. It's very straightforward. Yeah. It's very easy. Yeah. Okay. So example. Okay. A spring mass system. That's a mass, and that's a spring stiffness. So we can put into state space form, and that's our ABCD, and we put a disturbance in. And this is what the disturbance looks like. At each try, the disturbance consists of two disturbance, frequencies 10 radians per second and 5 radians per second. At each try, you can put in different amplitude for the disturbance, different phase. You can put a different bias. Okay, so every time at each try, you collect input-output data, and the data is corrupted by this sort of disturbance. Okay, and we don't know disturbance. We just know all we know is the output data that's having corrupted by that is by this. And we don't know how many disturbance there are, what they are. We don't know all these amplitude, phase, and frequency and bias. We don't know anything about that. Okay, we still want to get the macro parameters out. So characteristic of the data record in this example, one disturbance frequency is made to coincide with the system natural frequency. Okay, that just to make the problem fun. So you have a disturbance frequency masking the system natural frequency, and we can separate. This method can separate. That's not an issue. We can have 10 sets of disturbance corrupted input-output data used in the identification, one from each try. The disturbance, like I said, amplitudes, phase, and bias are allowed to change from try to try, and the system does not need to return to the same initial condition after each try. So in this example, n is the order of the system, which is 2, and there are 2 disturbance frequencies, so f is 2. That makes the minimum number of p is 7, and we pick, so 7 is the, p equals 7 is the minimum number we should pick, and we pick any number which is more than that. So in the example, I pick 10. Actually, I pick 10, so that's a typo. Should be 10 there. And then once you pick P, you can identify the combinations D, CM, and all these combinations, and then these are the parameters that you identify. Okay, and then you can go through the unscrambling process to recover the system macro parameters from the identified combinations, and they are here, and they are exactly correct. So you can, with this kind of data, you can come back and get the P matrix. Basically, the macro parameters build your P matrix in learning control, and they can be identified. So, oh, the alpha and betas came from components of the CM and CC, things like that. So, which are over here, yeah. So, which is also like coefficient of the AX model, yes.
What happens if there's another one more cell? So you have to pick, like, now right, you take a P equals 10.
If P equals 10, so we can, so n plus 2f plus 1, so n is 2 plus 2f plus 1, and if you pick P equals 10, then you can accommodate maybe 3, 6, accommodate one more frequency. Yeah. So you don't have to pick that, if f is 3, you don't have to pick 10, you can pick, so the P you pick is the P that satisfies that equation, which is an inequality. So to be safe, you pick P equals 20, and then you save. Right? So to pick a big, went down, just pick a big number. Okay, so that's, you don't have to know the right number. Just pick a big number, and you can do it. Okay. So that's system ID using this formulation, induction matrix formulation for ILC. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears and talk about basis functions. Okay, so now basis functions. Why basis functions? Remember the model that in the learning control that relates input del U equals P del Y, and del Y equals P del U model, where P matrix is a matrix of the macro parameters. Okay. Now, if the system is time varying, then the elements are not on the main diagonal, are not repeating anymore. So CB here is different from CB down here if the system is time varying. So this matrix no longer have repeating elements. Before, for time invariant models, this matrix had repeating elements, which are the macro parameters. But when the system is time varying, then P no longer has repeating elements. Okay, so that makes the ID problem more difficult because you need you identify more parameters. So, and that's an example of a time varying model. If you have a nonlinear equation linearized, which has an existing feedback controller, add to that a learning control, and you can linearize this equation about a trajectory, you can get a time varying model which repeats from try to try, because it's linearizing about something that is not changing from try to try. So your model is a time-varying model. So that's an example of a time-varying model that you may have as a result of linearizing about some trajectory. Okay, so now because P now does not have repeating elements, the identification of the P matrix a lot of data from multiple tries. For example, if your trajectory is 100 points long, then you need in the order of 50 or so experiments to collect enough data to identify that P matrix. Okay? If your data record, if your trajectory is 1,000 points long, then you need 1,000 divided by 2, more or less 500 experiments to collect enough data. That's the minimum number of experiments you need to collect to identify that time-varying P matrix. Okay, which is impractical. It doesn't make sense to collect a 500 set of input-output data. You can do it, but that's too much. Okay, so that's one problem that you can see if the system is time-varying and you're trying to identify it. So, so now what we can do is we can restrict the input to lie in certain space. So we make up basis functions to model the input time history. Okay? And then we can also use the same or different set of basis functions to model the output time history. Okay, so once we do that, we don't need a model that relates the input to output data. We have a new model that relates to the input coefficients to output coefficients. So the size of the model now is a function of number of basis functions that we have. Okay, it does no longer dependent on the length of the data record or the duration of your trajectory, but only on the number of basis functions. Okay, so that makes the basis function make the ID problem easier, because suppose my trajectory is 1,000 points long. Before I have to do 500 experiments, and if not too many, suppose I use 10 basis functions to model my input, then I only need to do 10 experiments to identify that model that relates the coefficient of the input to coefficient of the output. So the number of experiments I need to perform will be significantly less. Okay, that makes the problem, the ID problem, more practical. Another good thing about basis functions is that it allows you the opportunity to learn the gross motions first, followed by fine-tuning. And that's kind of interesting. That's intuitively very appealing. We're going to learn something that has some, fine features. Let's learn to do the gross motion first, and then as we do more and more tries, we can learn the finer motion. Okay, so that's very attractive intuitively. The basis functions allow you to do such a thing. And one thing that is nice about this basis function is that the critical issue is the input basis functions, not the output basis functions. Because as long as you have enough basis functions to model what you need to make the trajectory you want, whether the output basis function model the output or not does not matter. Okay, and that's kind of interesting, and I could show you why that is the case through this example. Let me show you. Let me skip a few slides and go here. Suppose you say I collect a set of basis functions. I use a set of basis functions, and this set of basis function is sufficient to cover what I need in terms of my input space, but it does a lousy job at mapping the output space, at approximating the output by these basis functions. And you want to use this model to design a learning controller. The claim is it doesn't matter what the output function is. Okay, whether the output function is lousy or not doesn't matter. In the end, you still get the right answer, as long as the input basis function is right. Although you base your control on the incorrect, insufficient output basis functions, and this is how it works. Suppose you have a desired trajectory Y design in here, and it has two parts. One part is inside the space of the basis function you pick, and one part is out of it. Okay, because by assumption I said the output function or the basis function are not, suppose a case when it's not really good enough. So it has two parts. So the design output has two parts. One part is inside the space that you pick, and one part is outside the space that you pick. Okay. Now for the part that in the space that you pick, the learning control can do something, can react and do something, and it makes this output. It produces this solid line. Okay. And for the part that is outside the space that it doesn't see, therefore it doesn't do anything. Okay, so so that curve becomes that curve. It's the same curve. The nice thing is the error that this portion makes, this trajectory has, exactly cancel out the error so for the portion it doesn't see, it doesn't do anything, it makes some error. The portion it sees something, it didn't see completely, so it also makes an error. And the two errors cancel themselves out, the end is perfect. Okay? Right, so you can have two wrong and make a right, basically, what I'm saying. Okay? You have a wrong model, based on wrong model, therefore you make wrong correction, and somehow that wrong correction, and then so that wrong connection that combines with the part that you don't see, and therefore you didn't react, therefore it just stays where it is. The two parts cancel themselves out, so in the end you're right. Okay? So you can see this. So two wrong can make a right.
Are you saying that you learn the part?
So okay, the two parts, the part that you see you can learn, you do something to it. The part you don't see you cannot learn, you do nothing to it.
But it means that you have to learn the part that you can see.
Yeah, you have to learn the part that you can see. And you will not do a good job because you only see partially, therefore you can only correct partially. So the error that you make in correcting partially exactly compensate for the part that you don't see, therefore you don't correct, and therefore the two parts cancel themselves out and you do right again. So the point is, as long as the input basis function are in the space that you need to have, you in business. Don't worry whether that space is sufficient to capture your output basis function or not. That's not something you would worry about.
Does it affect the rate of conversion?
No, doesn't affect.
So it doesn't matter at all?
Doesn't matter at all. No, doesn't matter at all. Yeah. So what I call two wrong can make a right. All right. So now, and this idea of two wrong can make a right can extend to disturbance problem also, because you can have a wrong model. Therefore, you think with wrong model, wrong disturbance. You use a wrong model and a wrong disturbance, you get a right answer too. Okay. So anyway, all right. So I'm going to introduce this algorithm, which we call an optimal control algorithm, learning control algorithm, LQL. So the system is, this is a problem statement. Given a system with plan and output disturbance, find an optimal control which minimizes this cost function. This is a standard cost function of the classical LQ problem. And do so by learning control. Okay, now, what's the advantage of learning? Well, we know that if we know the model A, B, C, D, and you postulate that cost function, then by standard optimal control theory, we can write down what the optimal control input should be. Okay? So that's, if we know the system, we can write down what the optimal control solution should be. That's easy. Now, but that optimal control solution is optimal only on the model that you assume, not on the real system. With learning, you can make it optimal on the real system. That is the benefit of learning control. You cannot do otherwise. You learn to get to be optimal on the real system, not on the model of the system. Okay? So, and on top of this, in this algorithm I'm going to show you, we do it through basis functions. So we synthesize the control action by building up basis functions. Now, normally you can pick a set of basis functions and find the optimal coefficients. And suppose you add one more basis function to this set, then you have to re-optimize the whole thing. Okay? But if the basis functions are conjugate basis functions, then they have a property that if you add one more basis function to fine-tune your control, you don't have to change the optimal coefficient you already obtained. That's the beauty of conjugate basis functions. Okay, adding one more and find the new coefficient. This new set would that combined with the old set of coefficients will give you the optimal solution. You don't have to go back and re-optimize the previous set of coefficients if the basis functions are conjugate basis functions. Now, where do the conjugate functions come from? Well, they have to depend on the system. Every system has a different set of conjugate basis functions. And the way it's done here in this algorithm is done from identification. So every time we do one experiment, we come out one conjugate basis function. One ID experiment produces one optimal, conjugate basis function. Then the learning control algorithm will optimize that. So we converge to the optimal coefficients for those. And then we add one more learning experiment. We get one more basis function. And then the learning control only optimize that, the coefficient for the next, the one that we just found. So without having to go back and re-optimize everything, because these basis functions are conjugate and they are found from experiments, from identification. So that's the third bullet here. It says conjugate basis functions are identified from data from multiple tries, either in batch mode or one at a time, and one experiment produces one basis function, one conjugate basis function. We can also, when we do these experiments, we can use many kinds of, we start with a set of basis functions and then make them conjugate. So you can start with a set of wavelets as your basis function and then make them conjugate basis function. Or you can use a set of Lagrange polynomials and start with those and then make them conjugate basis functions. So if we used wavelets, then there's a very nice advantage, because wavelets are functions that are orthogonal, and they are dilated version and translated version of a wavelet is orthogonal to the previous wavelet. Okay, so if the system is time invariant, then you don't have to do additional experiment. If your input is shifted, then the output is shifted. So if the wavelets are shifted, then you don't have to run another experiment. You just use the old experiment and shift your data, and then you have your result. Okay, so it results in a number of significant time saving. For example, if you have your input has 128 points, so the input space is 100 dimensional 128. You need only 49 experiments to cover that space. The rest can be done through shifting. And if you increase your input space from 128 to 256, you only need to add 9 more experiments, okay, to cover this space. So, and as you increase more the number of experiments you need to add, will tell you that the saving is dramatic. That's the benefit of using wavelets. But you don't have to use wavelets. You can use Lagrange polynomials or anything you like. But if we use wavelets, then we have that feature. Yes?
In your algorithm, or say in your experiments you've done with this, do you always fix the number of basis functions, or do you have some way of adjusting?
Yeah, every one new experiment we do, we add one more basis function to it. Until the error comes out to what you feel is.
I want to ask you in the context of that.
Yeah.
It's really a question for you, but maybe Mark wants to think about it from the context of what he presented yesterday. But the basis function approach, does it get you closer to somehow maybe true learning? I mean, maybe one reply to Mark is that learning should involve variation on structure, underlying structure of your changes in your understanding of the structure of what you're trying to learn about, rather than simple parameters with structure. But here, the structure you get is variable in some sense.
Yeah, it's a variable in the sense you become yeah.
So does this answer this question about learning? I mean, of course, you're not controlling it. You're identifying it, right? So
Well,
halfway there or not?
yeah, it depends on what learning, how to define learning, right? And it's definitely it has more bells and whistles than just tuning parameters. Now we have basis function, and every time one new experiment is added, one new basis function is created, and the control is, the input history is more finely tuned, and you get to some point and say, okay, that's good enough, and I stop. So It's more than the standard constant gain tuning. So maybe, yeah, it's moving toward that direction, I think. But it depends on what we mean by learning. You know, learning is a big term, and different people have different interpretation of what learning is. As far as we are concerned, if we use data from multiple tries and we try to improve it, we call that learning. It's like you practice, you know, serving a ball or something. You just do it over and over again, and somehow you do it better every time, and that's called quote-unquote learning. So,
I would be careful to use the word learning for them, but okay.
yeah.
What happens if you really exploit the system data as part of the baseline?
Yeah, you learn something about the system as you go along, therefore it helps you. Yeah, that's why I always define learning when I start to talking this stuff to any people from other communities, because what is different between adaptive and learning, right? Then we have to make up some difference, otherwise you can't. And the way I understand it is if you process continuing and you don't stop, that's like adaptive control. But if you stop and start, then you call it learning by definition. Okay.
One can ask why it's
yeah, well, yeah. Right. So iterative control, adaptive control, right? Sure. Okay, so this is an example of this algorithm on a very flexible system we call spine. And spine is a set of 72 rods mounted on a very thin wire. And it has an actuator that can move each rod up and down. It has an optical sensor that can detect the motion of the tip of any rod. Okay, so you can move one rod up and down, and you can detect the motion of any rod. So it's a very flexible system. And this is what it looks like. That's the pulse response. It takes about 50 seconds once you start perturbing it to get it come down to, you know, this kind of level of vibration. Okay, so it's very flexible system. You want to perturb it, it takes a long time, 50 seconds, to go to that level, which is you can still see, you know, it's not quite at rest yet. Okay.
You need to make it more physical. You push on one rod, and it starts a wave propagating down. It comes to the end, and it starts propagating back. And so you watch the waves going back and forth for 50 seconds. What is the measurement?
The measurement is, well, what we have, it's not shown here, but suppose this rod is a rod you want to measure, then we put an LED light emitting diode here, and there's an optical sensor here, which can sense that light.
And you push on one other.
And we push, and there's an actuator here. I don't know, you can see it here. The actuator is there's an elastic that vertically push on a rod, up and down.
So what is the application background for this?
Oh, this is to study vibration, control of vibration system, flexible system.
I mean,
He comes from the aerospace
I'm-
community.
Oh, is
Spacecraft are very
Flexible.
And you want to learn
Yeah.
to do a maneuver accurately.
Yeah, this is a control of a flexible, large structure, flexible system. Okay, and then this is a very flexible system, and control of such system is challenging because of the multiple of so many
you said
modes.
it's
Yeah.
mounted on a wire. Where is the wire?
The wire is in the middle.
Middle.
So think of a wire in the middle,
Holding the width.
and holding is a rib, and all these rods are mounting on it. So each rod can rock like this.
The wire itself is not.
It's not
It's
really
not-
a wire. It's a
Thin rod like a wire. Yeah. Think of a thin rod, and then mounted on these rods. Okay. So they can go like this.
But the flexibility is not from the wire.
No, from the rod vibrating.
No, it's not a wire. It's a central rod,
Okay.
and it's got a torsional torque. So you just push on one of the ends of these rods, and you twist the central rod, and the wave starts propagating down.
So it's all these rods are mounted on this middle spine, and then if you start pushing on a rod, you see the rest of the rod start vibrating, with the wave moving back and forth. Okay, and that's the system pulse response. You know, it takes a long time for it to decay, 50 seconds to go to that level. Okay, now so what do we want to make this? To make a very difficult control problem, learning control problem, by making it track a rod, the tip, to follow a path. Okay? And this is a trajectory we want to track. Go up, stay flat, go down, stay flat, go up. Okay? And look at the time scale. That's 1.2 seconds. We want the rod to do this in 1.2 seconds, 1.25 seconds. Okay? While it takes 50 seconds for the rod vibration to decay. So what does that tell you? It tells you, forget about feedback control. It's not going to work. It's very difficult to design a feedback controller to track this because it takes 50 seconds for the vibration to suppress. And you want to track this motion in 1.2 seconds. So this is a situation where learning control is good. Okay? Feedback control would have a hard time. Okay? Why? Because you had to...
Try to design a controller that with a time constant that's 1/50th of the time constant of the system. You got a hard job.
Yeah, okay. So if you're still not satisfied with this problem, I can come up with another problem. I also work in control of quantum mechanical system. And in quantum mechanical system, the job is to move the system from quantum state to another, and by applying finely tuned laser pulse, and that operation lasts 1 picosecond. Okay, so I don't know of any control system, field control, that can handle that time scale. 1 picosecond, finish from start to finish. Okay, that's obstacle number one. Obstacle number two is even if you have a 1 picosecond control system, you can't measure it because when you measure the quantum mechanics, you mess it up. Okay, Heisenberg principle of uncertainty. You can't measure it. The moment you measure, you destroy the state. Okay, so you cannot do anything but learning control. Feedback is out the window. Just cannot measure it because. Well, yeah, because the purpose is think of if a molecule which you want to cut at a certain spot, like think of like a scissor, right? To cut a long chain of molecule. So you want to make the system go from one state to another by cutting only a particular bond. Okay. If you heat it up, the whole thing got destroyed. So you need to have a way to just cut one bond and leave the rest alone. So there is you can set up an electric field that does just that. And how do you do that? You do through learning. You try, look at it, and once you look at it, it's destroyed. But you know what it was like before you look at it. The second time you set up the same system and fire again. So you just fire on multiple of these systems. And every time you measure to see what you did, you destroy it, but that's fine. The next time when you know it's right, you don't look at it and you know it's in the right state. Okay? So that's another example why you can't do anything but learning. But anyway, okay, so that's back to the spine example. You can see the overlay. Actually, there are two plots in this. One is the desired and one is the learned. So it's right on target. Yes?
What does your input signal look like?
Oh, I don't know if I have the input signal. It's messy. It's a messy input signal. I don't think I have.
Your contention is that it should not have been generated by conventional controllers, the same input.
By feedback approach. By feedback approach.
Is it not the output of the linear system?
Yeah, of course, if you apply that input, then you can get the output, this output. But the thing is, how can you get that through feedback? You cannot get through feedback because the time constant of a feedback control system must be very, very, very small. And the system has a very long time constant. So that makes it very, very difficult feedback control system. Yeah.
The settling time you'd have to produce to follow that curve is so far from the settling time of the original system that you're...
So this is effectively an open loop response. It's properly chosen.
Yes, that's what learning control is, yes.
Yeah.
Right. And you can do it through learning, but not through feedback. because you want the output to be the tracking from beginning to end. See, I want the error to be 0 here too. I'm not willing to pay for some initial transient at the beginning of my trajectory and say after some time it tracks what I want. No, I want it to track this from beginning to end, from time 0 to end. So if you have a feedback system, you need some time constant for it to for the initial effect to decay before it begin to track. But for learning, we want to track from beginning to end. We want to take care of the initial condition effect, and that's one thing learning can do. Yes.
How close is this work to what you observed?
How what?
How close is this work to what you were trying to control, to what you observed? It wouldn't take long.
No, it's 10 rods away. Yeah. 10 rods away, not co-location. That makes program even more difficult.
You have an actuator that's very fast, that you can apply and actuate the signal. What kind of actuator is for preserving the rod?
It's like a speaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's inside the rod.
Voice coil motor.
It's a coil. Yeah. Voice coil. Yeah. Okay, so now another thing about learning is that this algorithm, you can learn to emphasize a certain portion of your trajectory. Let's say I don't care about the rest. All I care is this flat portion. I want to track those. Then I can design learning controller in this framework easily to learn to do that, tracking just this portion. And if you look at this, you count how much control energy you spend, it turns out that this you spend a little bit less than the other, just for fun. Yeah.
Your reference trajectory doesn't start immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sometime.
Yeah.
I think that's quite important. If you hadn't started the first time for that.
Well, you have to give it some. Well, no, it doesn't really matter because if you can always artificially create a
Starting from rest, don't ask for
yeah.
more velocity than you can get in one time step.
No, it's just that one has to
Mhm.
do that.
It has to do with your actual limit, right? Yeah.
On the relative degree, or the effective relative degree.
Yeah, that's true too. So there's so much you can push.
I mean, is there essentially you're 10 rods away in the experiment?
Mm-hmm.
So is there some effective
Yeah,
delay?
I think that had to do with how long it takes for the signal to go from the first rod to the 10th rod before you can do something, you can see something. Yeah.
Then your earlier point from earlier in the morning, you still can't do anything with the relative part before the relative degree.
Yes, that's true. Right, that's a limit because of the actuator sensor non-collocation.
The algorithm is non-causal.
It's non-causal.
So that could be interesting to see.
Yeah.
If you look at the input together with this.
Yeah, I could have put that. I could have put that. I didn't. Okay, so and this is a system which we can do very good control ID on. I don't have the result of the ID, but the ID can be done so well. And say, suppose we do the best ID we can possibly do, good, which is my experience aerospace, standard. That ID is absolutely excellent. If you use that model and do inverse control, to see what we get, right? Take the model, take what directly you want, compute what the input should be, and this is what it gives you. So this is the model you can get by inverse control alone. So do the best ID you can possibly get again, okay? And invert that model, apply the control, and that's what we get. Very far away from what we want. So the rest is done through learning. No other way.
Because the input saturate on trying to track the first part?
No, just because the model is not sufficiently correct. And because of the low damping, the moment you leave it off, that difference will continue to ring for a long time, and that messes everything up. So slide, not perfect, but this is the most. I didn't have a slide. I can show you a slide how good the model, the model is. We collect data on one day. The next day, we come back and collect a different set of data. Okay, and we use the input, and we use a model collected from the previous day to predict the output of the second day. And you can zoom in, and you can see the difference. 3-4 times, you can see the difference. It matches every point. Looks like, it's beyond anything we can hope for. If you do an aerospace ID problem, that's excellent. And yet, for this system, you cannot do it because tiny, if you lose just tiny bit off, that initial effect is going to ring all the way for 50 seconds before it starts dying out. And this is what happens in 1.25 seconds. You see, so there's no time for it to die out. So inverse control, so what I'm saying is the gain from here down to what I showed you before is through learning. Yes.
Control, that's a causal inverse?
That's a P inverse. Right? You know P, which is inverse P at U, right? So you know the model, you know what you want, and that P dimension is, in this case, 250 something, I don't know, 260 by 260 or something. It's easy inverse. Oh, number of time steps. So it's 250 number of time steps translate to 1.25 seconds, 1.2 something seconds. So this is like number of time steps. So there are 250 some time steps in this trajectory. Sampling rate, well, 1 over 250, which is, I don't know, 0.04 milliseconds.
So is there any concern about your aliasing introduced some new frequency that you didn't count on?
That's how many, that's,
Watch the waves progress like this.
yeah, it's
not so high frequency.
it's not, yeah, it's 1 over 20, yeah, we're okay.
20 to 30 hertz.
Yeah.
You can see.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah, it's not an issue. And also, I also show you in the bottom slide what you do learning with a standard proportional learning controller. There's a single gain and tune, it wouldn't work either, okay? So, it's divergent. So you do the standard, heuristic controller design, it wouldn't work. You have to be more clever than that. You can prove that it works. Theoretically, the error will go up to some huge error, and then it comes down again. Yes.
Your LQL, you get the nice plot, you got a good result.
Yes.
Save the input signal and come back the next day and use the same input signal. How will it work?
I don't know we did that. Yeah. I don't know we did that. Yeah. I don't think we did that. It depends on the repeatability of system. And that's one thing about learning control. You can know beforehand to know whether it's good for learning control. You look at the accuracy that you have right now, and then you look at the repeatability of the hardware. Okay? And learning control can bring you the error down from the current error level down to the repeatability level. And that's the limit of learning control, beyond which you cannot do more. So that immediately tells you, how much error can you improve from what you currently have, to go from current error to repeatability error. Yeah. And that's room. It's room that you have for learning control. Don't expect to get all the way. Yeah.
You turn your learning gain down slowly as you go.
Okay, so now now that's learning control. Now let's do repetitive control with basis functions. Let's go back to the. So now I'm going to do repetitive control with basis functions. Okay. Let's look only at the disturbance cancellation part for now, and if we know what the disturbance frequency is, then we can set up a mechanism that, say, the control is some, is a function of some amplitude and frequency and phase, and we can tune, the phase and the amplitude to cancel that adaptively. That's no big deal, right? So if we know the disturbance frequency is, then we can make a basis functions here, cosine and psi, of that same frequency, and then just tune the coefficients, and they can adaptively cancel out that disturbance. So it's not a big deal. So think of cosine and psi in this example as basis functions. okay, of that make the control. So now suppose we don't know what the disturbance frequency is, because either it takes too much time to know, or because it's changing. Okay, then what basis function do we need to use? That's the question, right? So this is just an idea, detailed in the paper, but you can make, through the interaction matrix formulation, you can make up a model that I call disturbance explicit model. We saw this before, with an eta k as which is called disturbance effect term. Okay, and eta k can be estimated online, and then we can use time delay versions of eta k as basis functions. Okay, so instead of picking our basis function, we online compute eta k, and then use time delay versions of that as basis function. So for example, the system has one disturbance frequency, then eta k is a cosine or sine of that frequency. Let's say a cosine. Okay, we shift it, we make a cosine, a sine out of it, or a component with sine in it. So all we need is shift, have enough shifting so that the new basis is more more orthogonal, more independent than the original basis function. Okay, so simply by shifting signals, time delay versions of this disturbance effect signal can be used to build as basis function, and then we can tune A and B. Okay, so the good thing about this thinking is that if basis function change quickly, it can adapt fast, because every time the bit frequency, I'm wrong. If the frequency change, then that reflects in eta k, and then that reflects in the basis function that you're going to use to synthesize the control correction. So example, this is a 3 degree of freedom. This is a numerical example system that a chain of 3 mass is a spring. So a wall, spring mass, and then mass, spring mass, another mass, spring mass, another mass. Okay, so 3 mass system. Think of a control input to mass 1, output from mass 3, and disturbance to mass 2. So non-collocated situation here. And suppose that the disturbance has 2 frequencies acting, one at 60 radians per second and one at 100 radians per second. And we want to use this what I call adaptive basis function technique to suppress this disturbance. That shows the disturbance input. It has 2 signals, 2 components, 2 frequencies there. That's the eta signal that's computed. It resembles that. Okay, and then we use time-shifted version of this as basis functions. So in this case, there are 2 disturbance frequencies. You need to shift this signal 4 times to generate the 4 basis functions that are needed. And then we tune the coefficient with those as time delay disturbance effect as basis functions, and that rejects the disturbance on the output as shown in that example. Yes.
How do you decide the value of D?
Oh, yeah. That depends on how many what the different frequency is, right? Then so if you your output is that's eta k, and then we're gonna shift such that if you try to make a cosine out of this or something like that. So it's
robust to the error in D.
Yeah, if
D correctly.
Yeah, if the D are too close to each other, they're not good, right? So you need to space them out. So there's some tuning involved.
Okay.
Some tuning involved, yes.
So isn't that worse than, say, a classical integral model of the because that will automatically get the phase to the disturbance right, so you have to do a time model, and it will get the amplitude and phase correct.
Yeah, well, it's...
Wouldn't you get the same result or similar result?
Except that, yeah, here you don't have to know the disturbance frequency.
You said you have to know the disturbance frequency, right?
No.
No,
No, you don't know.
It's more close to disturbance observer idea.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't need...
The observer knows the
It's closer to the disturbance observer idea,
But
yeah.
you put another shift.
Another
so
shift.
Generalized.
Yeah, shifted, yeah.
That's good idea.
Why did you have to that are big enough that you haven't got a nil condition set of basic functions, then it captures all the frequencies as long as you do enough shifts.
Yeah.
And you don't have to know the frequencies, except for purposes of conditioning. To make it
Yes, you have to know in principle sense when to what to do it about.
you have to know enough that the shift is big enough to make a
The basis function not so. Yeah.
Optimally, you chose to find the cosine for each frequency, and that defines the shift.
Okay, so that's an example, and now we can do this for tracking as well. So in this example, we track. This is the output function we want to track. So I make a, that's a signal we want to track. So it's not a periodic signal. And the control that needs to track that is given here. The disturbance effect is here, and then the adaptive basis function is here. So if you do a tracking problem, then you can online compute this new ADK, which is the time delay version of this, will serve as basis functions to build that control to track that path in the presence of those two disturbances. So this is an example where we have a disturbance which is changing, frequency is changing in time, tracking this signal which is not periodic, and we adaptively build the basis function to build that control to cancel that disturbance and maintain tracking. Okay. This is time steps in here. This is time in seconds. I don't remember the delta t. I think the delta t is given. I didn't put the delta t down. I forgot the number. But it's pretty fast. This is a simulation. It works pretty fast. Now this is an experiment. This is a UQP is an ultra-quiet platform at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. This is a platform that has this is the base, and this is the vibration isolation platform. Got 6 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then one behind it. So 6 legs. Each leg can be made longer or shorter. This is piezo strut, ceramic stack struts, and it's like a Stewart platform. And by moving these legs, 6 legs, you can orient that platform. And imagine this as this mounted on a satellite, okay, and that's your instrument mounted on this, and you want to, and disturbance coming from the satellite, okay, structure, and you want to move these 6 actuators to cancel any disturbance that is coming through from below. Okay, so that's a vibration isolation platform.
Typical disturbances are from control over gyros or reaction wheels over momentum wheels, and slight imbalance between the wheels causing vibration, and then an actuator on the sort of rectangular thing is a mock-up for the spacecraft, and mounted below the black thing on the left chamber is an excitation to simulate what the spinning slight imbalanced field would do, and then you want to have a fine pointing equipment on the Stewart platform that is isolated by the algorithm from vibrating spacecraft.
It's very sensitive. It's extremely.
If you
clap your hand, you see the vibration. That's how sensitive it is. Yeah.
It's very sensitive piezoceramic action.
Yeah. Very sensitive. Geophone sensor. Yeah, it's very sensitive. If you just clap your hand, you can see the vibration already. So that's the kind of vibration we're canceling. Okay, so in this experiment, we put in a disturbance at 120 hertz, and the adaptive basis function approach, unlike compute that ADA signal, type shift it, and then generate the control to reject that disturbance. Okay, so that's experimental result there. The second situation is a case where you have a disturbance that is time varying, frequency is time varying. So this is how it varies. It starts at 120 hertz, and it ramps up at 2 hertz a second for 4 seconds. And then it's holding that value for 1 second, and then ramping down at 0.1 hertz per second for 4 seconds. So yes.
So what's the bandwidth of the overall control system? You have a feedback control system to stabilize. Do you?
No, it's
You don't have a feedback control system.
no,
to
it's
stabilize it?
no, no. It's just feed forward
Only
adaptive.
feedforward? Openly?
It's a nasty frequency response structure that loves to vibrate at a, what, 1,200 hertz or something. It's, but they don't have a feedback.
You don't have feedback? So the actuator is always acting against your environment. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The sensors are actually velocity sensors, and you're killing velocity. Geophone sensors is velocity.
So you can see that in a case where the disturbance is changing and you don't have time to detect what it is because it's continually changing, this adaptive basis of thinking can tune out the disturbance during this period. You see why the disturbance is changing. So it works pretty well. Okay, so concluding remarks. I hope I convince you that identification is important for high performance ILC or repetitive control problems. We have achieved substantial amount of theory and experimental results in this topic to date. I've introduced the interaction matrix formulation, and it's a very powerful tool. And basically, I show how it works in the learning control problem and in the disturbance ID problem. But it also works in other problems as well. And then, like fault detection, closed loop ID, okay, common observer, common ID. You can do forward filtering, backward filtering, all sorts of things. You know, the list keeps growing over time. We keep discovering new uses for this formulation. And for every problem, there is a different interaction matrix. Okay, it's not the same matrix. So the trick is to find that matrix for that particular problem. And then the rest become easy. Okay? So the key is you introduce freedom into the equation, make use of it in some clever way, and get out without needing to know what that matrix that you put in is. Because you need to know it, then it makes it harder. But the thing is, for all cases we've had so far, we don't have to know what it is. And we can go back and find out what it is, and then we can interpret what the meaning of it. For example, in the OKID problem, that matrix can be interpreted as an observer gain. Okay? But in other problems, you don't need to know what the matrix is. So it has use in predictive control, fault detection, and so on and so forth. So, and also, the basis function adds a very rich and practical dimension to the ID and control problems, iterative learning and repetitive control problems. It makes the problem very interesting. And in the back of your notes, I have these references, these selected references on this topic, IMF, learning and repetitive control over the years. And they are all in the handout that you have. Okay, and that concludes my talk. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you, man.
Yeah.
So we take a kind of long break for lunch. I was told that there is a buffet at the Sky Room. It's roast beef, shrimp, potatoes from the Middle East. It's about $81. So we'll come back here at 2:30 and continue with Professor Mark.
Bye.